Welcome back aliens, my name is Davin Reddy and in this video we'll talk about Spring Boot. Now before going for Spring Boot, let's try to understand what is Spring Framework and why it is so famous. Now to understand this, let's go to year 2000. So in that time, if you want to create a project in Java for enterprise, you will be using a lot of Java EE features and one of them is EJB. Now EJB was quite famous and it was one of the best technology available at that point, and you can achieve a lot of features, right, like messaging, then lookup for the entities. The only problem is, it becomes difficult to manage them, and then of course you are working with entities, so they're heavy. And that's where these people, they came up with a concept of POJOs, where you can achieve the same features with the help of POJO, and they have included that in Spring Framework. Now Spring Framework provides you this feature of working with POJOs, it provides you a feature of dependency injection, and we can work with AOP. So there are so many features provided by Spring Framework, so it becomes a framework where you can achieve any business purpose. And the best part of Spring Framework, it can integrate with other frameworks as well, like Hibernate and Struts. And now we know why Spring is the best framework. Now there's one problem. Now when you talk about Spring Framework, of course you will be building big applications, right? And when you say big applications, you will be needing some external jar files. So that's one thing, you have to work with jar files. The second thing is the configuration. And trust me, when you're working on the enterprise application, you need to add a lot of configuration, or you have to configure a lot of stuff. And that's where the problem starts, because if you're working on a project, you want to focus more on the convention, your coding part basically, not on the configuration, because we are developers, we don't want to spend much time in the configuration. I'm not saying we can directly skip all the configuration, but we try to focus more on the coding part. Now the thing is, Spring is good, but we want to focus more on coding, and that's where these people who created Spring Framework, they thought, okay, why don't we create something where as a developer, they will focus more on the convention, and that's where Spring Boot comes into picture. Now again, Spring Boot is not a replacement for Spring Framework, because as a developer, you are still using Spring Framework, okay? So there's a developer, there's a framework, you're still using the same framework. But in between, just to help you, we have Spring Boot. Because Spring Boot says, hey developer, I know you want to work on a project and Spring is the best framework. The only thing is there are some jar files which you have to add, and there's a configuration you have to do. And don't worry, I'm there for you. So Spring Boot says, I will give you dependency and I will give you the configuration. Awesome, right? Now the main idea of Spring Boot is to give you a production ready application. So the moment you create a Spring Boot project, you don't have to do any configuration. It is runnable and you can deploy it on the production server. It will do nothing, but it will work. You don't have to do any configuration. And the more features you want, you can add some features, and for those features, you can do some small configuration. But all the basic configuration will be done by Spring Boot. Okay, now there's one more thing, let's say we are not working on Spring Boot, we are working with normal Spring project, and we want to make a web application. And if you want to deploy the application, what you will do is, of course, you need a server, maybe a virtual server or a cloud server. And if you have a server, you need to install a Linux server. Okay, so that's done. So we have a physical server, then we have a Linux OS. And on that OS, of course, you'll be installing a web server, maybe an app server, maybe Tomcat or Glassfish. And then on that Tomcat, you'll be deploying the WAR file which you create for web application. So many layers, right? And nowadays we are moving towards microservices, and we want to make it a bit easier for us, right? And that's why Spring Boot says, hey, you don't have to actually do all those things by yourself. In Spring Boot, it provides you an embedded server, which means the application jar file which will create. Okay, we will not be making WAR files now. We'll be making a jar file, and inside the jar file, we'll be having Tomcat. Oh, we'll be having Tomcat inside a jar file? That's right, that's an embedded Tomcat or embedded server, you can say. So Spring Boot says, your jar file will have an embedded Tomcat, which means you can run your project and on any JVM. You don't basically need a web server there. Now Spring Boot provides you so many features. Two of my favorite is, the first one is starter projects, because if you want a project, let's say if you want to make a web application, Spring Boot will say, okay, we got Spring Boot Starter Web. It will give you a web project. And if you want to work with JDBC, Spring Boot says, okay, don't worry, we have Spring Boot Starter JDBC. You can simply use that and it will give you a ready project. What about the configuration? Spring Boot also has Spring Boot Auto Configuration, which will do the configuration for you so that you can focus on the convention, not on configuration. So let's say if you want to do some configuration, maybe you want to modify configuration, maybe you want to do some manual configuration. Is it possible? Does Spring Boot provide you the XML files? And the answer is no. Spring Boot will not generate any XML file for you, okay, because there is no XML file. Then how would you modify if you want to do some configuration? And that's where we have a special file which is application.properties. You can add the properties which you want there, and it's quite simple. And in this video, we'll talk about dependency injection. Now, if you are working on a project, let's say if you are working on some advanced project, of course, you will be using some design patterns. And one of the design patterns which we come across is dependency injection. Doesn't matter which language we use, maybe Java, C#, PHP, we have this concept there. But why is it so important? So in fact, we have these questions, right? What is dependency injection and why everyone want to use it? In fact, if you talk to some expert in industry, people who are working from a long time, they use this concept by default. For them, it's like a normal thing. But for new developers, it's a new thing, right? For them, you need to understand what is dependency injection and why to use it. Now, how to use it, that we'll see in the practical, but then why to use it, that's the question. Now think about this. Now when you say dependency, in software, what we do is we build code, right? We build objects. If you are working with object-oriented programming, so we build objects, right? And those objects are dependent on some other objects. So we create this object graph, right? So one object is dependent upon some other object, and that object depends on some other object. To give an example in real life, let's say if you want to buy a laptop, or if you want to build a laptop, let's say you are a laptop manufacturer. Now, in this case, in laptop, you have certain parts, right? We have a RAM, you have a hard drive, you have a screen, and of course, what makes a good laptop is good parts, right? Example, if you buy a laptop from any company, the same company, they have a low-range laptop and a high-range laptop. What changes is the type of hard drive we use, the type of RAM we use. So of course, all these components are not built by the same company. So let's say if you buy an Apple machine, of course, Apple will not be building all the stuff by themselves. They will be buying it from some other companies. Maybe the screen of MacBook is from Samsung. Maybe the hard drive is from Hitachi. Maybe the RAM is from SanDisk. So all these different companies, they help one company to build a project or build a machine. Now, the same way, if you want to build a project, and if you want to, let's say if you have an object and that object is dependent on some other object, in this case, you will not be building all this stuff by yourself. Of course, you will be having classes for that, right? So in Java, what we do is we first create class and then we create object. Now, to get an example, let's say we have a class here, which is class, let's say laptop. And inside class laptop, we need a object of hard drive. We need an object of RAM. Now, how will you do it? Of course, you will be saying new, right? And when you say hard drive, of course, you need a class, right? And that, let's say we have Hitachi hard drive. Now, let's say if you build a MacBook with Hitachi hard drive, what if in future you want to change it? Because we want to achieve this concept of loose coupling, right? I'm sure you know about this concept of tight coupling and loose coupling. That's what we have learned in software engineering. When you say loose coupling, it means one object is not totally dependent on another object. It may get replaced. Example, if you have Hitachi hard drive, in future you might want to use Samsung hard drive. It should be possible, right? And that's why we use this concept of abstraction. What we do is we say, okay, for each class, let's say Hitachi hard drive, let's create an abstract class or an interface called as hard drive. So when you instantiate it, it will be something like hard drive ABC or hard drive obj equal to new Hitachi hard drive. So that in future you can change it from Hitachi hard drive to Samsung hard drive. It should be that easy. But there's a question here. We are hard coding it, right? We are saying, hey, I'm going for a new Hitachi hard drive. And that's a bad thing, because the moment you say hard coding, the moment you say new, you are going for tight coupling. That's what we don't want. So we want someone else to give me those dependency. Oh, that's an important term here. So the laptop object is dependent on the hard drive object. That's a dependency. So we want to inject the hard drive object inside this laptop class. And the way you can do that is by using some service, which will be an external service. They will inject the dependency. Okay, how it is possible? So we have this concept of dependency injection containers. Now they are responsible to create an object for you. Of course, the object has to be created. So they are responsible to create the object for you, and then they will be injecting in your class. Okay, but where to mention that I want to inject and how it will create the object, and that's where we have to do configuration. Now there are different ways of configuring it. Example, if you are using Java, in Java we have Spring Framework, and in Spring Framework we need to do a lot of configuration. Earlier days we used to work with Spring Framework, we used to configure everything using XML. Okay, so that's how you can configure. So you create an XML file, and in that XML file you can mention, hey, if someone is asking for hard drive, give this object. Okay, now when you say XML, it means you can edit XML in future, right? So that is not a tight coupled. Okay, but still, as a Java programmer, you don't want to focus more on XML. And that's where we have Spring Boot in Java, using which what you can do is just, we will be having some class as Hitachi hard drive, right? Or Samsung hard drive. So on top of these classes, you will simply write add component. That's it, okay? So you simply write add component, which makes them dependent, which makes them a component of a Spring Framework, which will be generated as per requirement. Okay, so those objects are ready with Spring Framework. But what about this class? How will this mention that you want this object? So on top of your hard drive, what you can say is you can say auto-wired. Okay, that's it. Your Spring Framework says, or your Spring Boot with the help of Spring Framework says, okay, here someone is asking for hard drive. Okay, so this class needs a hard drive, and I do have a component there, so I can connect them, right? That's a auto-wired. And just imagine, it's so beautiful. They are getting connected. Again, the implementation you will see later, but this is the main idea behind dependency injection, right? But why we need this? Is it only because of tight coupling? The answer is yes. We don't want to achieve tight coupling. We want loose coupling. Plus, there is one more important factor, which is testing. You need to test your software, right? Now, we always test our software as a whole. But sometime we need to, not sometime, always we should also be testing your each component, each unit. Now the thing is, let's say if you want to test a laptop, and when you test a laptop, you should also test the hard drive. But don't you think when you buy a hard drive, like when Apple bought hard drive from Samsung, they must have tested that hard drive, right? Why you need to test the hard drive again and again? So what you want is, when you're testing a laptop, you want to separate the hard drive, right? So in fact, in Java world, what you can think is you have a class, and that class is working with a database object. Now you are testing this class, right? You don't want to test the database object. So you can create a mock object of this class only if they are loosely coupled. So if you have a mock object, you can easily test this class without affecting your database. Okay, and to achieve that feature, you have to make sure that your software is loosely coupled. And that's why we have so many words, right? We have loosely coupled, we have dependency injection. So that's so amazing about dependency injection. You just need to implement it so that you can test it better, you can maintain it better, and how it exactly works, that we'll see in the practical video. So once we have seen the theory of Spring Boot, so why do we need Spring Boot and what features it provides, it's time to create an application. But before going for the application, of course, we have to do a software setup, right? Now, when I say software setup, basically we need an IDE, which is Integrated Development Environment. Now, which IDE we have to use here? Of course, everyone have their own favorite IDEs available, right? Example, some people do love NetBeans, some people love Eclipse. Now for Spring, which one to use? Of course, we can use NetBeans. NetBeans does provide you inbuilt plugins for that. You can also use Eclipse. Or one of the best one for Spring itself is STS. Now Spring belongs to Pivotal, so they have their own IDE, which is STS. And if you want to go for the paid version, you can go for IntelliJ. So if you just go to Google and search for, so if you search for IntelliJ, just click on enter, you can say this is the official website which belongs to JetBrains, and you can download the IntelliJ IDE. The only problem is it's not free for Spring. So they have two versions. One is the community version and second one is the enterprise one, or the ultimate, which you say. Community is free. So if I click on download, you can see we'll be having two options. So community is free, but then if you want to work with Spring Framework, you need to go for the commercial one, which is Ultimate. And commercial, yes, commercial provides you Spring features. So you can go for this one. So people who are working in Java environment for a long time and they think they want to invest so that it will improve their productivity, of course you can go for IntelliJ. Otherwise, in this series we'll be using STS. Now STS is a Spring tool suite. This is developed by Pivotal, and this works better in if you want to go for Spring Boot. Now, is it a very different IDE? The answer is, if you have already worked on Eclipse, this is almost similar because this is built on Eclipse IDE. So when I click on download for this, so I have Mac, so I'm using this. So I've just clicked on this. If you're using Windows, you'll get a Windows option there, and you can see it is downloading now. So you can see I have a setup here. Now, once you have downloaded setup, you just have to double click it if you're using Mac. Otherwise, for Windows, you just need to unzip it and it works perfectly. So for Mac, you just have to do some extra stuff. You have to shift the STS to the application so that you can directly access from the application folder. So if I see my application, you can see we got STS here. So if I click on STS, and it will take some time to open as I'm doing it for the first time. So once you have opened STS, it will ask you for the workspace. Now for this, what I will do is I will say Spring Tutorials or Spring Tuts, and click on Launch. Now it will open your STS, and all the projects will belong to that particular folder which you have mentioned there. And you can see we got STS open. People who have worked on Eclipse, they know this is the same, right? So if you run Eclipse, you will see the same screen. Now, if I go to About STS, you can see it says it is based on Eclipse platform. So it says build version this one, and platform is Eclipse Oxygen. So ultimately, you are using Eclipse. The only thing it provides you is shortcuts to make Spring applications. Now, how do we create our first Spring application? It's very simple. You just right click it and you say New. Now, if you are making a normal Spring application, you can simply select a Maven project, and you can select Spring. Otherwise, if you are creating a Spring Boot project, this is amazing. We have Spring Startup Project option. Now you will not get this option directly in Eclipse. Okay, so that's the advantage of using STS. Click on this one. Now it will ask you for the service URL. Now why all these things? Because when you create a normal project in Eclipse, it's straightforward, just say next, next, next. But here, now since we are using Spring Boot, the thing is, Spring Boot, as I mentioned, it is an opinionated project which you get. That means the feature which you need, it will give it to you. You don't have to do much configuration, as it also supports auto configuration. So what happens is, whatever project you need, you will be getting that project from the official server. So they have this service called as start.spring.io. So whenever you need a project, you need to go to this website and you have to download the project. That means you need an internet connection to create a Spring Boot project, and of course everyone has it nowadays. So the app which you want, the project which you want to work on, so the basic structure will be getting downloaded from the official website. So for that, we have to give a proper name to it. We can give any name, doesn't matter. I would say first project. And now you have a choice, because you can select either Maven or Gradle. That's your choice. I prefer Maven. I would go for Maven here. And then you have to mention your group ID. You have to mention your version number if you want, or artifact. I will keep it as it is. I will not change it at this point. Maybe in next video we'll create a new project with different names. And then I will click on next. Now here you can see it is giving you so many options, and this is the best thing about Spring Boot, you know. The time I'm making a video, we also got Spring 2.2. Earlier I was working on 1.5, but then 2.2 got some new features. It does support Spring 5, it does support reactive programming. As of now, we are not going for all those stuff, so let's keep it version which is there. And then if you want to, let's say if you want to work with Spring JDBC, it's very simple. Just type JDBC and then you can select this one. The amazing part about Spring is it does support auto configuration. So if you have not provided any manual configuration, it will do it for you. But since this is our first video, let's not get into that. I will skip all those things as it is, click on next and click on finish. The moment you click on finish, you can see your project is coming from the official server, and you can see the progress here. It is downloading from the official server, and that's why it takes some time to build the project. And if I expand this, it is still into downloading phase, so it will take some time to complete these steps. What if you are not using STS? What if you want to get this project? What you will do? So if you are using Eclipse, it's very simple actually. So let's say you have Eclipse, and when you open Eclipse, how will you build that project? Because if I say right click, so this is Eclipse, okay? So if I right click here, if I say new, you can see we don't have Spring Startup Project option. In this case, what you have to do is you have to search for start.spring.io. This is a website where you can download the app. So this is Spring Initializer, from where you can download this stuff. So you can see we have group ID. You can name it, let's say, first project, the same name which I'm giving. And then if you want a dependency, you can just type it here. As of now, I don't want to change anything. Simply click on generate project, and you can see it will give you the zip version. You just have to unzip it, and then in Eclipse, you just have to import the project. You will get the same thing which we got in STS. So the only advantage, or one of the advantage of STS, is you don't have to go to the official website. You don't have to download that. You will get that directly as we get the option. And you can see we got our Spring Boot project here. Again, we'll not be doing any much code here. It's just simple Spring Boot project. Maybe I can print hello world just to show you if this thing works. And you can see I got some code here, nothing to worry about. We'll talk about this later. I will simply type this out, and here I would say welcome to boot. That's it, nothing much. Now, how do we run this project? Now we can run this project normally as a main, normally we run as Java application, but then if you want to use Spring features, of course you have to go for the second option, which is Spring Boot app. Let me just click on that. Now this is extra features which you get, and that's why it will take some time to do. And you can see we got the output as welcome to boot. Till this point, we have not used any Spring feature, okay? We'll do that later. But this is our first application. So this is our head start for the first code of Spring Boot. In this video, we'll talk about Spring dependency injection and auto wiring. So we'll try to understand that with some diagrams so that we can understand what is happening behind the scene. So to do that, what I will do is I will make a simple Spring Boot application. So I will say Spring Startup Project, and by the way, I'm using STS. You can use Eclipse as well. The only thing is to download this app, you have to go to start.spring.io, because we don't have this window in Eclipse, by the way. You just have to go to this website and download the app, the Spring Boot app. And then I will keep all this thing default because I'm not concerned about the name yet. I'm just concerned about the concept. I will simply click on finish. Now we got our project here. It's on the way. So it does take some time to download this app. So you can see that we got our project here. This is your Spring Boot project, in which you have the Java folder, you have resources, you have test folder where you will put all your JUnit test cases. You have Maven dependencies where you have all the required dependencies for the project. Now what I will do is I will simply create a very simple, in fact, I will be creating a very simple application here. And I would say, let's go back to, so if I open this demo application, you can see we have a main method here. And inside this main method, I'm simply saying run. Now I want to create a class here, which is alien. And the way you do that is by saying a class, and this class name, it will be alien. And I will click on finish. I want a simple Pojo here, which is alien, nothing fancy. And in this alien, I want certain properties. The way you create a property is very simple. You say private int, I would say AID, and I would say private string a name. So these are two things we need. In fact, we can also go for technology. So every alien has a favorite technology, right? So I will say tech. And this, for these three variables, I want getters and setters. So I will say source generate getter setters. I will say generate getters and setters for all these three variables. Click on OK, and you can see we got a simple Pojo. Now that the idea behind dependency injection is, what if you want to create an object of alien here in this class in main? So normally what we do is we create an object of alien by saying alien a equal to new alien. So what we are doing here is we are manually creating the object by ourselves by using new. But then dependency injection says, hey developer, you don't have to focus on object creation. You focus on the logic. We will give you the object when you require it. So here I will not say new alien. Then question arises, how will you get this object? Now if you see this run method of which we get by default, now this run method returns an object of configurable application context. So run method returns object of this one. So what I can do is on this side I can say configurable. So it is configurable application context. I would say context equal to, because anyway run method returns that object, so let's hold it. Now once I got this object, your Spring Framework says simply say context dot get bean. So when you say context dot get bean, it will ask you for the type of class, type of object you want. I would say, hey, I want a object of alien class, and your Spring Framework says, hey, you will get the object. But can you trust it? I don't know. Let's try. Now, how do we trust it? Let's go back to alien and let's have a simple method here, which we will execute just to see if it is working. Because if you don't have the object, of course you cannot call a method. So I will go back to this method and I would say system.out.println and I would say in show. So if you get the object from the Spring Framework, that means yes, you got, and it will be able to call show. So the way I do that is by saying a.show. So if it is calling show, that means you got the object. And you can see we have not done much of the configuration here. We are simply getting the object of alien. I mean, we got a class alien, and here I'm saying context.getBean alien.class. Let's run this and let's verify what is happening. Now to run this application, we have to say Spring Boot app, because this is not a normal Spring, this is Spring Boot. So I would say Spring Boot app, and it's running, something is happening behind the scene, and we got an error. I was expecting it, so we got the error. It says no qualifying bean of type com.example.demo.alien. So of course we don't have this object, but why? What is happening behind the scene, and what this method is all about? What is happening here? So to solve this problem, let's understand what is happening here. Now Spring provides you another container. So the way we have JVM, we also have a Spring container. To understand that, let me just go back to this diagram, this Paint application here. What I would say here is we have JVM, right? And on that JVM, we have, inside this JVM, we have a special container, and this container is called as a Spring container. So I would say this is a Spring container. Now what this container will have, this will have different objects. But which object? So the object which Spring specifies, those are objects. In fact, the object which we create here, those are called as Spring Bean. So whatever you have inside this will be called as a Spring Bean. But how do we create a Spring Bean and when they get created? So basically we have two different scopes when you create a Spring Bean. First is the singleton scope, and the second one is prototype scope. In fact, in Spring we have different scopes available. We also have request, then we have session. But then those things we use in web applications. In core applications, we use these two only, which is singleton and prototype. Now how do we specify singleton? How do we specify prototype? And what exactly it means? Now if I go back to alien here, so if you look at this alien is not a Spring Bean here. And even if it is Spring Bean, when it gets created, so the container of Spring Bean or the container of Spring gets created on this line. The moment you say run, it returns you the context. This is where it initializes your container. And in this container, it will try to create all the objects. But which object? Let's say if I have 10 classes, if you have 15 classes, will it create object of all the classes? Not exactly. You have to specify as a developer which object you want. In this application, I just have 2 classes. What if you have, let's say, 10 classes, 15 classes? And out of 10 classes, I want to create objects only of 6 classes. So I want Spring Framework to give me 6 objects. Other object I will take care of. Or maybe I don't even need those objects. How do we specify to Spring Framework, hey, I don't want all the object, I want object only of alien? The way you do that is by writing @component. So we have to use this annotation called as @component. By doing this, you are specifying, hey Spring Framework, this is a class of which I want an object. Now by default, the moment you run this application, the moment you say run, it will create it will create this thing for you, right? It will create this container for you. The moment you run this application, it will create one object of alien here. So let me just name it as A1. So it will create a A1 object for you. And this A1 is of type alien. So A1 is of type alien class, right? So you can say alien.class. So the A1 object here, which is object created by Spring Framework, is of type alien.class. It will be available in the Spring container. Okay, it is just available. The moment you say get bean, The moment you say get bean, your Spring Framework will say, okay, developer wants a bean here of alien. So because when you say get bean, it says, okay, a developer wants a bean, but of which type? That's why you're specifying here. You're specifying, hey, I want alien type bean. So it will check, do we have an alien bean there? Hey, we do have it. Can you see that we do have an alien bean here? It will get connected automatically. So that means Spring Framework is injecting this object in your application. So this object which is created by Spring Framework or Spring Container, you will get this object in your application. That's what we say dependency injection, right? Now it should work, right? We have mentioned component there. I will say run as again Spring Boot application. And this time you can see we have not got any error. You got the output as in show, so it is working. So the moment you say component, it will make this as a Spring Bean and you can use it anywhere. Now let me just add a twist here. What if I say get bean once more? Will it create two objects? And how do we verify how many objects we are getting? To verify that, I will get a constructor here and I will say right click source constructor with fields. I mean without fields. I don't want any fields here. I just want a simple constructor which will print something, which will have super. Doesn't matter even if you have super there. I would say object created. That's what I want. So I would say object created. So the moment I go back, now how many times it should print object created? Only once, right? Because we are saying we are using this object only once. Let's run this code as a Spring Boot and you can see it says object created only once. What if I don't even try to fetch this? If I say comment this section and let's run this now, you can see we got object created only once. I mean, even if you're not saying get bean, you got object created because Spring Framework says, hey, even if you don't want the object, we will give it to you. Because by default, Spring Framework uses a concept of singleton design pattern, which means it will give you the object pre-hand. I mean, you don't have to wait for the object creation. The moment you start the application, it will give you the object. Okay, what if I ask for this thing 2 times? I will copy this code and paste it here. This time I would say this is A1 and here also I would say A1. Now what do you think? Will it print object created once or 2 times? So you can pause the video, you can answer that in a comment section. So I hope you have entered the value in the comment section. Let me just run this code and you can see it is doing only once. So we are getting object created only once because in total it will create only one object. Because by default, Spring Framework uses the concept of singleton design pattern. So in singleton, you get only one instance. How about if I say prototype here? So if I go back and if I say prototype, and the way you do that is by going to, we have to use one of my annotation which is added scope. So the annotation is annotation scope. You have to mention what value you're going for. So we are going for, so we have to mention prototype. Now when you say prototype, it means it will be using prototype now. So it will be using prototype now, which means it will not create an instance by default for you. The moment you ask for the instance, when you say get bean, at that point will create an object for you. So in total, you'll be getting 2 objects now. So let's run this code and you can see it says object created 2 times because we are getting 2 objects now. Every time you say get bean, it will create a new object for you. Okay, now the point is, what if I don't even call this once? I will say comment this part. Now what do you think? Will it print once, 2 times or 0? Now since we are using prototype, which means even if you're on the application, you will not be getting this object. So you will not get this object if you're using prototype. So this will not be there if you're using prototype. Let's verify. So you can see we have not got object created even once because it is prototype. So it will create the object only when you say get bean. Quite simple, right? So this is dependency injection and this is how you use component. But the video is more about auto wiring. What is happening when you say auto wire? So to understand that, I will create one more class here and I will call that class as, let's say, laptop, because every alien needs a laptop, right? And that's how you can work on a project. I mean, not exactly laptop, computer will also do. Some people write code on mobile phones as well. So anything, any electronic gadget will do here. I would say private int LID, which is laptop ID. And I would say private string brand. I'm not concerned about other parameters here. We can talk about price, CPU speed, RAM configuration, everything. But then time in, let's keep it simple. Right click, I would say source, generate getter setters. I would say generate getter and setter. Select all and click on OK. And I also need a toString method so that if I want to print something, I would say source generate toString. And here I would create one more method which is public void, let's say compile. Let's say laptop has some compiler and then we want to compile it. And it should say compiling. So how do we do that? So we'll say system.out.println, and I would say compiling. You can write a complex code here, but then just to make it simple, I will simply say compiling. And now in Alien, when I say show, it should also call the compiling. Oh, hold on. How will you say compiling here? Because to call that compile method, you need an object of laptop, right? So I would say private laptop. So we got laptop object here, and just to make it work, I also need a getter setter for this. I would say right click source getter and setter, which is that getters and setters. Select all, click on OK. So we got a laptop getter setter as well, and nothing fancy. I just want to call show, and from show I want to say laptop.compile. Now what do you think? Will it work? Because we have a laptop class, we got alien class. Inside alien class, we got laptop class. Okay, so alien class is dependent on laptop class now. Now what will happen? So if I go back to demo, and when I say show, in fact, I will do it only once now because we have seen how do we call 2 times. And I also want to use singleton here just to make it simple again. Now what will happen? So if I go back to demo, let's run this to verify what is happening there. And you can see we got null pointer exception. But now why null pointer exception? Is because if I go up, we are saying laptop.compile. In fact, this is the error. This is the line error. So if I click on this error line, okay, it is in show and it is in here. So you can see we got laptop.compile. This is the problem. The problem is the laptop is not instantiated because before using the object, we have to say new laptop. But again, we are using Spring Framework, right? Why I should say Spring Laptop? And your Spring Framework is not even creating object of laptop. So if you want to get the instance of laptop, you have to say @component. So now when you run this application, in your container, you will get one more object. So I will say this is one more object here. I will call this L1, and this object will be of type laptop.class. So this is object of alien.class and this object of laptop.class. And what I want, so when you say component, you will get both the objects. Now will this work? Because we got the object, right? We don't have to say new keyword. So the moment you run this code, oh, again, we got the same error. We got the null pointer exception. But we got the object, right? But there's one problem. A1 object here is dependent on L1. How your alien object will know that there's L1 object available, and how do we search it? So we have to connect this two. We have to say, hey alien, there is some laptop object available there, search for it. How do we mention that? How do we ask alien to search for it automatically? And the way you do that is by simply using a concept called as AutoWire. So I will say AutoWire. So the moment you say AutoWire, it will try to search for the object in the Spring container. Now will it work? Let's go back there and run this code, and it worked. Can you see that? It worked. We got the object. We got the output as compiling. So what is happening behind the scene? So when you say AutoWire, it will try to connect because A1 has an instance. I mean, alien object needs an instance of L1 or a laptop object. So it will search for the type, okay? By default, AutoWire searches for the type, not for the name. L1 doesn't matter. In fact, by default, the name is not even L1. The default name for anything is laptop itself, but with small l. The default name for this A1 object is not even A1. It is small a alien. So you can search by name as well, but we want the type here. Okay, what if you want to search by name? For that, we have to use one more annotation, which is @qualifier. So using qualifier, we can do that. So I will say @qualifier, and here you can mention what? You can mention laptop. So now it will search by name. Can we change the name of the Can you change the name of here? Because by default, the name would be laptop, right? You can say, hey, I don't want laptop as a name. I want LAP1. Can you do that? Yes, we can do that. We can have a name now, LAP1, which means the object which Spring creates here will not be laptop1 now. It will be lap1. So this is the object name. And since we are using qualifier in the alien itself, we have to say lap1 because we have to search by name, right? So by default, AutoWire searches by type, @qualifier searches by name. So I hope you understood something what is happening behind the scene. If you enjoyed this type of session, because I'm just trying out different ways of explaining you different concepts, let me know in the comment section if you liked it, because I will be making some more videos based on this on Spring. So that's it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. In fact, I should be doing a quick recap what we have done. So I wanted the object of alien. So alien is basically a class which has 4 attributes or 4 properties. We can say AID, A name, tech, and laptop. The laptop is a special type, and we have a laptop class here. And using add component, it will instantiate your object. When you say instantiation means you want a new object, right? So the moment you say component, it will create an object in a Spring container. And using this auto wire, you will get connected with the object which is created by Spring Framework. Let me just run this code once again to verify, and it works, right? So try it out and let me know in the comment section if you have any questions and your feedback. Is it good, bad? In this video, we will see how to create a web application using Spring Boot. In fact, we have seen what is Spring Boot. We have seen how to achieve dependency injection, auto wiring in Spring Boot. But in real world, what we do is we build a web application. Now, it may be some website where you will show views, maybe implementing AngularJS or using JSP, or maybe you just want to create a REST service. Again, we'll go towards REST service later, but in this video, we will see how to create a web application where you'll be making a view in JSP. That is tricky. Okay, so what I will do is I will create a web application, but how do we do that? Now, if you remember the steps for creating a Spring Boot, it's very easy. Just open STS, right click here and say new, and click on Spring Starter Project. And here, of course, the project will be coming from start.spring.io. And I want to give a proper name. So I would say my web app. Okay, you can give it, it doesn't matter. And the group ID would be com.telesco. And here also I will mention it as Telesco. Okay, now once we have done with that, click on next. Now this is important step because we are not building a normal application. This is a Spring Boot web application. So of course we need to add the web feature there. Now, when I say web feature, you must have seen Spring MVC. In fact, if you have not seen my Spring MVC video, that is the important video you have to watch first. So if you have not seen that, in the description area, you will find a link for the theory video. Now here we have to add a web, right? So I will simply search for web, and you can see we got this option of web. Now, since we are using Spring version 2.0, we have one more option, which is reactive web, which is introduced in 2.0. We'll not go for that now. Let's select this web and click on next. And then at the end, you will click on finish. You will get your project, but is it working? That's a question. And you can see this project is coming from the official website, so it will take some time. So we got our project here, which is my web app. Now, if I see this project, you can see we just have one package which has a file. Now, if I open this file, you can see something here, but let's ignore this part as of now because we just want to focus on creating a web application. So we'll close this. And if I open my SRC, we have a main. Now, basically, when you say you want to create a web page, so first of all, I want to create a page which is index.jsp. So inside this main, now this is important. You can create a web page. You can create any JSP page provided it belongs to a web app folder. So inside this, we need to create a folder called as web app. So I would say a folder called as web app. And inside this web app, you can create any number of pages you want. So I would say new, and I want to create a JSP page. So I would search for JSP, and you can say next. And I will name this page as home.jsp and click on finish. Now what I want is whenever I request for home, so the URL I want to go for here is, I will write it here. So the URL I want to go for is, of course, localhost :8080, that's a port number which it takes, / whenever I search for home, or why home, we can have any URL there. But just to make it easy, whenever I search for home, it should call home.jsp. Now, if you have worked on MVC, you know what I'm talking about. So in MVC, we create a model, we create a view. So this is our view, and this is our request. So the request goes to controller, and the controller will call this home.jsp. Oh, unfortunately, we don't have a controller yet. Now, how do we create a controller in Spring? It's very easy. You know, in Servlet, if you have worked on Servlet, to make a controller, you have to get a Servlet that will do a lot of things. But here, we just need to say a new class, and then we can give any name. I can say this is my home controller. Again, there's no compulsion that it should have a home controller name. You can have any name, doesn't matter. And then click on finish. Now once you got a class, it's very easy. You just need to add a method. Normally if you remember servlets, you can just link these things with servlets. In servlet what we do is we create a service method. And don't worry, even if you don't know servlet, that's fine, because Spring MVC is much easier than servlets. So we need to create a method, right? Because we want to perform an action. So I would say I want to create a method which is public, or maybe I will say void, and I would say maybe home. Again, doesn't matter what your method name is, but just to keep it simple, I'm using the same method name as the request. And I would print something here, nothing fancy. I just want to print something, because the first step would be, see, technically, if I want to make you understand this, if I open my web browser, so when I search for localhost 8080/home, I want to get that page. As you can see, it is not responding anything now. It's because we don't have that link. Ultimately, what I want is someone should accept this request. So step one would be, I want a controller who will accept that request. So of course, to do that, first of all, you need to give a special preference to this page, or to this class. We need to add an annotation. And trust me, when you work on Spring applications, you have to remember a lot of annotations. So the annotation which you have to use here is add controller. That's it. You just need to use an annotation called as controller, and you have to import the package. Now, of course, when you're going for REST API or REST services, you need to go for REST controller. But as of now, let's keep it simple. Let's make it controller. Now, whenever I get a request, your Spring Boot application will make sure that this controller will handle all the requests. And who is doing that? Thanks to auto configuration. If you remember, in Spring Boot, we have this feature. Behind the scene, it is doing configuration for you. So we have a dispatch servlet behind the scene, and that dispatch servlet is responsible to send request here. But how will you map it? Because there might be different requests, right? Currently, we are sending request for home. Maybe I want to send request for products. I want to send a request for contact us. I want different pages for different requests. So we need to specify something called as request mapping. So using this request mapping, you can mention for which request I want to handle this. So when I will say, whenever we get a home request, I want to import the package first. So whenever you get a request for home, I want to execute this method. But how would I know if the method is getting executed? So I would say system.out.println. I know I'm printing on the console. I should be printing on page, but let's do that later. So I will simply print hi, because if it is printing hi, that means there is someone who is accepting the request. Okay, that sounds fun. Now what I will do is I will run this application. But how? Now, if you remember, when you work with Servlet or normal Spring MVC, we need a server, right? And you can see I have not added any server. You can see it says no servers are available. Oh, that's a problem now. But what if I say you don't need external servers to run Spring Boot application? Well, that's a magic, right? Because if you expand this Maven dependencies, you can see we have a Tomcat here. Where is that? Yeah, you can see that we have embedded Tomcat inside your project itself. And that's a magic, you know, because you don't need external server to run this. Now you will say, what's the advantage of this? Now look at this advantage. Let's say if you are working on a project, and if you want to test this project in some other laptop, and you got your friend's laptop now, and luckily your friend's laptop has a Eclipse or a STS. But then if you are using a normal application, you need to install Tomcat externally. But here, you just need to import the project, that's it, because project itself has a Tomcat. So it saves lots of your efforts, and plus, it is easier for deployment. Okay, so once we know this, let's run this project, because the moment you run this project, it will start the internal Tomcat. So here we go. I will right click on the project. I would say it's run as Spring Boot app. It will take some time, obviously. So you can see it is running, and the Tomcat has started. You can see that it's saying Tomcat started at port number 8080. So I'll go back to my browser and I'll say localhost 8080/home. The moment I say enter, oh, we got an error. Okay, that's fine. We got an error. That's fine. Important thing is go back to the console. Okay, I hope I will be getting hi there. Okay, can you see that we got hi? That means this controller is handling your request. That was the first step. Okay, when you build an application, web application, we go in a series of steps. First, we need to create something which will accept the request. Sending a response, that's second thing, you know. So there's something going wrong with the response. You can see this error is on the server side, not on the client side. Client has sent the perfect request. It's a server problem, but at least there's someone who's handling this. But then how do I call a page? That's the second thing we want to mention. how do I call this home.jsp? It's actually very simple, you know. After printing hi, or maybe you can remove that statement, you simply need to mention, hey controller, you are responsible to call this home.jsp page. Simply say return home.jsp. Now since we are returning a string, you will say string, that's it. When you say string return home.jsp, it will call that particular JSP. That sounds awesome. Now, how it knows where to search, because you might be having different folders, how it knows that you have to search in web app, and that is what is done inside Spring Boot. So Spring Boot has this auto configuration stuff which is actually searching. So in the configuration itself, they have mentioned that your pages will be there inside main web app. Yes, if you are changing the path, then you have to do some configuration. We will see that later. But as of now, we just need to mention return home.jsp and it will call that particular JSP. That's a beauty, right? In fact, the same thing can be done, we have done in Spring MVC if you have seen those videos. But let's run this. Let's see if it is working. I will right click here. I would say run as run on Spring Boot. Okay, now this is an obvious error. What is going wrong here? The problem is when you work with the external servers, you know, when you work with Servlet or normal Spring MVC, whenever you restart the application, it will restart your Tomcat server. But unfortunately, the Tomcat server which we have here in this project is embedded Tomcat. So every time you run this project, it will try to run another Tomcat server. It will not restart the old one. And that's the problem here. So what you have to do is, you should always close the earlier run. So you should terminate it and then you have to run this. Otherwise, you can click on this button which will restart the old application. So I will say relaunch and it should work now. So you can see there is no problem. Tomcat started. I will go back to my browser and I would say enter. Now something weird happened. You can see we got the same error, but we got something in the downloads. You can see we got home.jsp as a download. That's weird, right? Now what is happening here? The thing is, when you say you are calling home.jsp, now JSP is a special type, right? And of course, everyone knows that Spring Boot is something which is very new. And when Spring Boot came into picture, REST APIs or microservices were very famous. So that means when Spring Boot came into picture, the focus was on REST API. Or maybe there are different Vue technologies, right? Not JSP, we have Velocity, we have ThemeLeaf. So your Spring Boot says, hey, by default, I will not support JSP because my work is to send a response. Example, if I say, you know, there's one more annotation here, which is response body. Again, we'll talk about response body in detail later once we talk about REST API. So if you say response body, let me just show you something what happens if I say response body. So let's run this, and if I go back to the page and if I say enter, you can see it is printing home.jsp. You can print any text you want. Example, in home.jsp, unfortunately it is empty. I will print something here. I would say hi. Okay, why hi? I would say I love Java. So if I say I love Java here, and from the home controller, so it will print home.jsp because this response body says, hey, whatever you are returning is actually the data. It's not the page name, it's data. But I don't want to print a data, right? I don't want response body. What I want is I want to call this page. But unfortunately, your Spring Boot doesn't support JSP. Now, in this case, you need to add a support. Now, of course, you will say, hey, what's the use of a Spring Boot when you have to add the support? But trust me, when you work on real applications, nowadays we don't use JSP. We work on REST APIs. We work with different Vue technologies. Some projects are based on JSP. That's fine. You can just simply add that feature. Now to do that, just open your POM XML file, and in this you just need to add one dependency for that. So I will just come back here, and here I will add that dependency. But which one? So you have to go to Maven repository. I would say MVN repo. So I have to go to MVN repository, and here search for Tomcat Jasper. Now Tomcat Jasper, just select this one, the first one, and you need to select a jar which you need. But which one? I'm not sure. So to understand that, I will go to Maven dependency. So whichever version you are using for embedded Tomcat, which is 8.5.31, let's pick up the same one, 8.5.31, and copy this code, go back here and paste. And you can see we got Tomcat Jasper. Now your Spring Boot knows how to convert a JSP into Servlet. And of course, right behind the scene, doesn't matter which technology you're working, we have servlets running. So I will go back here and I will relaunch it. I hope it will work this time. Is it saying it is still downloading the source? Is it? maybe let's try. It says it is still downloading, but let me try once again. I will say /home, and can you see that we got I love Java and we got the URL because in the page there was this text. But this is working, right? So this is your first application where the flow is happening, right? So you are calling home page, it is returning home.jsp. But what if you want to send some data? What if you want to what if you want to accept some data from the client side, or if you want to perform some operation? That we'll see later. But the main idea is this is how you build a simple web application in Spring Boot. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section if you have any questions, and do click on the like button if you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. In this video, we'll continue with the web app using Spring Boot. So in the last video, what we have done is we have created this page which is home.jsp, in which I'm just printing I love Java. I don't want to print this localhost part as of now. So I made the changes here, and once I've made the changes, I can just restart the application so that let's see if it is working. I will go back to my browser and say enter. You can see I got I love Java. Now what I want is, if I go back to the controller, everything seems good at this point. But normally when you create an application, you don't keep all your files in web app. You don't put all your pages in web app, because web app is a folder which is public. What if you want to make it private? What if you want to put your pages in some other folder? Example, let's say inside web app, I have one more folder here which is called as, let's say, pages. So I have this folder which is pages, and I'm moving this home.jsp to pages. So that's the first change which I have done. The second change is, normally when you work on Spring Framework or Spring MVC, in fact, if you have seen my theory video of it, you don't normally mention the JSP pages. It's because in future you might want to change to velocity, you might want to change to Themeleaf. Of course, you don't want to put .jsp at the end. So we're able to search the page which is .jsp. So I have made two changes here. The first change is the location of the page, and the second change is .jsp. I've removed the JSP part. Now, as we know, we have a concept of auto configuration inside Spring Boot, which is doing this stuff for you. So the default folder is web app. The extension is whatever you mention here. But what if you want to configure this? Because we have not done any configuration yet, right? If you want to do any configuration, we have this special file called as application.properties. Now it belongs to this resources folder. And if I open this application.properties, it is empty as of now because we are not doing any manual configuration. But what if you want to do something? Now, what is that something here? So I want to specify two properties. The first one is prefix. So the path of a page is defined with the help of prefix, and the extension of a page is defined with the help of suffix. So it's very simple. Just say prefix. The moment you say prefix, you can see we get the entire list here. So you don't have to by heart those properties. Basically, this is a key value pair, okay? So on the left hand side, you specify the key, which is fixed, and the value is something which you specify. So I want to specify the prefix here. But as you can see, we have so many prefix here. And now you can guess it, right? Because we are not using Mustache, we are not using FreeMarker. We are basically using Spring MVC view. So we'll select this one. And then we'll say equal to whatever your prefix is. So my folder, which is /pages. So I have my web app inside this. I have my page inside this pages folder. That's the prefix. The next thing we have to specify is suffix. So I will go for suffix, and that is Spring MVC.view.suffix, and the suffix is .jsp. So those are the two things you have to mention. And likewise, you can configure whatever you want. Maybe if you are working with databases, of course, you can specify all the properties here. And this is kind of cool, right? Because you're not using XML anymore. We are using properties. In fact, we have one more option of YAML. So we can use that as well. But this is where you can specify all the properties. So yes, Spring Boot does provide you auto configuration, but that doesn't mean that you cannot do any configuration by yourself. You can. So if you want to do any configuration, this is how you do it. But let's verify whatever changes we have made, is it working? So I will run this application, and then I will go back to my page. I will say enter, and it's working. Can you see that it's working? Just to make some changes, let's say if I make a mistake here, instead of saying .jsp, if I make it, let's say .html. Now I just made that mistake there. Let's try. if it is working. I will go to my browser and say enter. You can see we got an error. So this is how you can configure it. So of course you have to make sure that you have a proper data there. So that's how you can configure, that's how we can separate the extension and the location of your page. So basically what we have done till now is we got this home page, which is .jsp, and then we have a controller. So whenever you send a request for home, I mean, whatever your website name is, let's say if you have a website name Telesco, so it will be telesco.com/home. So that's my request. So I'm handling that request by, so whenever a user specifies /home, I will be calling home.jsp. Just to show you on a page here, so I have a browser open. So if I go to browser, if I say localhost :8080/home, it is calling the home page. How can be that sure? It's very simple. If I just go back to my STS, and if you can see in the home controller, if I show you, we have, in fact, in home.jsp, we are printing I love Java. So everything is working perfectly. In fact, we have also seen how do we configure stuff. Again, we'll be doing a lot of configuration in future, but time being, let's do something new. Now, what if I want to pass a data? And of course, right, when you have learned servlets, we have done those things. Now, what I mean by that is if I go back to my browser and if I say, hey, I want to pass some data, example, I want to pass a name. Example, if I pass Naveen, I want to print that name here. So I will say, welcome Naveen. But the name might change, right? So if I'm passing Naveen here, maybe next time I will pass, let's say, John, maybe I pass Christina. So I will keep changing the name, right? I don't want to write this name here because of course it will be constant. Okay, that's one thing I want to do. Before printing something here, first I want to send some data. So how will I send data? Normally in the browser, what you do is you put question mark and then you say name is equal to Naveen. That's how you send data. So you say question mark name equal to Naveen. So we are passing this name to the server. But on the server side, we are doing nothing, right? You can see in the home controller, we are not accepting that value. Even to send that data to the home.jsp, first we have to accept the value. But how will I do that? Now go back to your servlet technology. In servlet, what we used to do is we used to create object of HTTP servlet request. And using that request object, we used to fetch data. Is it possible here? Let's try. Oh, but how will I fetch data because we have not created the object? Now Spring gives you the comfort of creating the object if you need. Example, in servlet, it was compulsory for us to refer both the objects, the request object and response object, even if you don't need it. But in Spring, you have a choice. If you want to use it, go ahead and use it. It's very simple. Just go here and type HTTP servlet request and we'll say REQ. So we have the access to that request object now. So you don't have to do anything extra, just refer it and automatically Spring will connect it with the available request object. And once you have that request object, you can simply fetch the value, right? So what you can do, you can go back here and say, I want to fetch a string, which is a name in this case, and it will be request dot get parameter. And in this, you will specify the key, right? Key's name. Now, how would I know key's name? Because from the client side, I'm sending that. So I'm sending name equal to Naveen. Now, of course, client will not be typing all those things in the browser. We will create a good UI. I mean, we can create a good UI from where a client will send. So there will be a text field where you will type the name, and the moment you click on submit, the URL will have the values, right? That's how your GET request works. And now once you have a name, I want to print this name on the home.jsp, but that will be secondary part, right? First, I want to check if the value is coming here. So I will say hi plus name just to verify if the name is coming from the client page to the controller. You should always do something in a proper sequence because then it will make more sense. Now, once you have made the changes, I'm trying to print data here. So just to recap what we have done, I'm using this HTTP servlet request object. You can use it anytime you want. There's no compulsion that you should be writing this. And then you just need to specify name here and your printing name. If I want to run this code, I will just relaunch it. Okay, now I will go to my browser. And if I say enter, of course, there will not be any change here. It will print welcome. There's no name here. But let's verify the console because I'm just printing on the console. So if I go back to my console here And if I go, you can see we got hi Naveen. So at least the data is coming from the client to the server. But now I want to show that on a page, right? How will I send that data from here to the home page? Now, technically here from a controller, I am calling .jsp. So it might be a request dispatcher or it might be response.send redirect. We have those two choices here. But how will I know which one is this? So if I go back to my browser, you can see we got a different page, but there's no change in the URL. So normally, if this is the case, it means your Spring framework is using request dispatcher to call home.jsp. And since you are using request dispatcher, that means they will be referring the same request object ultimately. Okay, if you're not sure about this concept, I would highly recommend you to watch my Servlet videos where we have talked about request dispatcher. So in request dispatcher, two servlets or one servlet and one JSP share the same request object. So what you can do is you can use request object. Example, I just want to pass this name to this home.jsp. So we can use request.set attribute. That's one way. And in JSP, you can say get attribute. That's fine. Otherwise, we can use session. Now, if you remember, we also have a concept of HTTP session, right? Now, how will I use those things here? It's very easy. If you want to use HTTP session, just type HTTP session. I will say session equal to request.get session. Now, once we have a hold on session object, what we can do is we can add the name in the session object. I will say session dot add at a set attribute. And you can say I want to pass a name and the value is name itself. So I want to pass a name. Now this name becomes a key, and whatever the value we have inside name, that will become your value, which is Naveen in this case. And then we are adding the value in a session object. But how will I fetch that in home.jsp? That's a question. Now it's very simple, right? We can write a Java code here, and then we can simply use session object. Otherwise, we can also use JSTL. So I will use a $sign here, and I want to print name. So this is a JSTL format or EL, which is expression language. Now will it work? Because I have done everything, right? The data is coming from the client. I printed it on the console. It was working. I have added the value in the session, and here I'm pulling it from the session. But will it work? Let's try. So I'm relaunching the application. So let's get back to the browser and say enter. Oh, it's working. Can you see that? We got welcome Naveen. So whatever data you're sending from the client side, it is getting printed on the home.jsp. So this is how you can achieve one simple flow. Of course, we are not doing anything big here because we want to just go into small steps, right? So what we have done till now is I'm calling a home page, I'm calling a home request, and then I'm sending some data which I'm able to print on this home page. Now, can I use HTTP response object? Because we have used request object, right? What if I want to use response object? It's very simple. Just give a comma and say HTTP servlet response. And now you also have a hold on response object. I mean, of course, we don't need that object in this example, but let's say if you want to use response object, then this is a way. So everything looks cool, right? It's almost similar to servlets. But that's also a problem. If it is similar to Servlet, why do we need a Spring framework, right? We have some amazing feature, and I don't want to reveal those features in this video. So just wait for the next video in which we will reveal what we can do with Spring MVC. We can just skip all this extra stuff, you know. We can also skip all these things, how that will say in the next video. Now, if you have seen this example till now, it's very simple, right? We are accepting a home request, and with home, a client might send a name. So in that case, I'm fetching the name of a client, and then I'm adding that to a session so that I can print that on home.jsp. Everything is simple. But now what I want to do is I just want to simplify this code, because this code being Spring MVC code is not that effective, right? So what we will do here is, instead of saying this, I don't want to use this request, HTTP server request and response. I want to accept these values directly. I want to accept this name directly. Can I do that? Can I just remove this thing and still it should work? Let's try. Now, if I remove this, of course, it will not work because we are using request object, right? That's one problem. What if I simply say string name? That's it, nothing much, just a string name, and let's remove this line. So whatever data is coming from the client side will be assigned to this name. That's what I'm expecting. The next thing is about the session object, because I will not get a session object without request object. So what if you can just simply specify, because you are working with Spring Framework, right? So Spring Framework should give it to you. So I would say HTTP session, and I think our job will be done because we don't need this line now. And automatically you will get an object of HTTP session thanks to Spring Framework, because we have this concept of dependency injection. So we got string name and we got HTTP session. Now will it work? Okay, this is just a try. So let's run this, let's relaunch the application. So relaunching done, and if I go back to the browser again and if I say enter, so you can see it is still working. So there's nothing wrong with the code, it's working, right? So how it is working, if I pass anything, will it work? Example, if I pass, let's say with another parameter, if I say name1 and enter, you can see it's not working. It is only working with name parameter. There is some matching happening behind the scenes. So the moment you say, hey, I'm passing a name here, and you also have a name here, so it will directly match with it. But still, if you want to have a different name, example, what if I don't want a name here? I want to have, so let's instead of name, I have my name. Now we have a different variable name, right? And of course I have to change here as well. So I would say my name and my name everywhere. So of course I have to change that. So we have a different name now, and still if I do that, of course it will, okay, so we have to relaunch it again. So let's go back to browser and say enter. So you can see it is not working. So of course we need to have, if I pass my name, then it will work. But here I want name and there I want my name. So will it work now? So if I say name and there it is my name, how it will match. Now in that case, if you have a different name, we need to use an annotation called as request parameter. So we'll say request param, and in this request param I will specify the names. I would say name. So whenever from a client side, when you get name, just assign the value to my name. Now this is also helpful when you are passing multiple parameters, because for one parameter it is easy to map. What if you have 3 to 4 parameters? In that case, you need to use request param, or you don't have a choice. Example, if I'm sending a age, name, let's say marks, we have 3 variables, right? So in that case, you need to use request param. So that's how we can ignore request object and response object. Now I have one more thing. What if I want to skip this session as well? Now, first of all, why do we need session? That's a question, right? Now we need session is because we are adding data into this session object, and then that data is going to this home.jsp. Now let's go with the flow here. So the flow is whatever data you are returning from here and whatever name you are returning here, it is actually going to dispatcher servlet. Now dispatcher servlet is a special thing inside Spring MVC, right? So whatever it goes to dispatcher servlet. Now dispatcher servlet basically need 2 things. The first thing is it needs the data and the view name. Of course, right, as a client, you need a view and you also need a data. So here also, if you can observe, we are passing the view name and we are passing a data. So data will be, let's say you can call data as model, and you are sending a view. So we have a combination of that which is called as model and view. Now how do we use it? It's very simple. So you will say, instead of creating object here, you can say model and view. I will say MV is equal to new model and view. And here, so once we got this object, what you will be doing is you will be adding the data in the model, and in fact in the MV object, and you will be mentioning the MV name. In fact, you, instead of saying return home, I will say return MV. And of course, when you are returning a model view object, you will not specify string there, you will specify model view itself. But then how will I specify the view name? And I don't want to use session anymore because we don't normally use sessions. We will be using model and view. So of course I have to still send 2 things, the view name and the data. In fact, I don't even want to print on the console. It's of no use. So I have a model view object. I want to send this data, my name, and I want to specify the view name. So the way you do that is by saying mv.add object, and inside this add object you can pass 2 things. The first one is the key, the second one is the variable name, which is my name in this case. So you are sending the data, but what about the view name? In order to specify view name, you can also say mv dot set view name, and in this you can mention the view name is home. So this is very powerful, you know, because you can add multiple objects you want. Example, you can say mv dot add object, you can add one more object, you can pass a number of objects from here, and you can set the view name. It is more clear to work with, it's more clean, because if you get stuck, if you get bugs, it will be easier for you to remove from here. Now, but after making all these changes, will it work? That's the question. Let's run. So let's get back to the browser and say enter, and you can see it works. So instead of using HTTP session, instead of using servlet or servlet request and response, we can simply use model and view. So just to give you a recap what we have done. So I'm accepting the home request, I'm accepting a name, and I'm sending that data. So I'm sending two things, the data and a view name. And when you say data, it's a model, and you have a view name. So Spring MVC gives you a special class called as model and view, which can hold two things. The first one is the view name, and the second one is the data. You can add multiple data as you want. So you can do that with the help of add object. So that's it from this video. Now what we have done till now is it's very simple code. We are accepting a request, and then with the request I'm also getting a name which I'm able to print on the home page. But what if I want to send some more data? Because normally when you send a data from a client to server, it might have multiple parameters. Maybe I'm sending the entire object values. Example, let's say what I will do here is I will create a simple class, and I will name this class as, let's say, alien. Now, of course, when I say alien, it simply means that someone who is working in a virtual world. So basically we are programmers and we work in virtual world. That's why I refer programmers as aliens. So we have this alien class, which is very simple. In this alien class, I want to have certain variables. So I would say this is int, private int AID. I want to have private string a name and private string language. So everyone have their own favorite language, right? You might work on multiple languages, but there is some language which you always love. So we have these three variables, and with these three variables, I want getters and setters. So we got variables and we got getters and setters. I want these values to be accepted. So from a client side, I want to send these three values. So example, if I go back to my page, if I want to send three values, I would say name. Now this time it will not be name, it will be a name, because I'm sending a names. Okay, I will just go back to my thing. So we got a name, AID, and lang. Let's go in that sequence. So I would say AID is equal to 1 and we'll say language is equal to Java. So I want to send these three details. The moment I say enter, you can see we got an error because we don't have anything as name there. We got a name. Okay, so first of all, I want to send these three things. If I go back to my page, you can see I'm not accepting all, I'm accepting name. It should be a name this time. And then we need to create three variables, right? It will be AID, it will be my name, and then we got language. But what if I want to accept the object as it is? Because of course, right, you are sending three values. So instead of accepting three different variables, what if you can accept it in an object? Will that work? So what exactly I want is, I want to say alien. Will this work? Let's try. So what I will do, instead of saying name, I would say name. I will simply say obj, and then I'm passing an alien. So I'm not passing one by one variable, I'm passing the entire object. So that's a question, will it able to accept all the values? Because alien does have three variables, but will it work? Let's try. So I will go to my home page, and then we are printing a object here, because object.aid, I will give a comma, and then I will say object.aname, and then we have one more, which is obj.lang. So we got these three things. So will this work? Let's try. That's what we are trying to do here. So if I go back to my page and if I say enter, you can see it's working. We got one, Naveen, and Java. So that's the beauty of about Spring MVC, right? You can send the values and it will be getting accepted in one particular object. So there are multiple reasons why you should be moving from normal server JSP to Spring MVC, right? So this thing is working. Now, if I just want to do one change here, which is what if I want to implement REST services? Example, instead of sending data in this way, maybe I want to send data in JSON format. Maybe I want to accept data in JSON format. Maybe I want to give a proper link for the hierarchy. How will I do that? Now, if you're not sure about what is REST API, I will surely recommend you to watch my REST API videos using Jersey so that you can understand how to implement REST using Spring. In this video, we will create a Spring Boot application using Spring Data JPA and Spring MVC. Normally, we'll create a web page where you will try to add some data in database, we'll try to fetch something. So let's see how do we do that. We'll create a project here, fresh project. I would say new Spring Startup project. Give a name to it. I would say Spring Boot JPA, and then I will say next. Now here, what are things we need? Now, first of all, we are making a web project. So I would say web. Now, what type of database I want? So of course, we'll be using JPA. So we'll select JPA here. And then what type of database I want? Now we can use any database we want. Example, we can use MySQL, we can use Postgres. Now, just for this example, I'll be using a in-memory database, which is we can use H2 database, which is in-memory database. And of course, we can use any database you want. And then we'll click on next because there's three things we need. Then we'll click on next and we'll click on finish. The moment you click on finish, you will get your project. Of course, it will take some time. So yes, we got our project, and you can see we got our project, which is called as Boot JPA. Now, what exactly I want? Now, first thing I want here is to work with H2, right? In fact, if I just want to show you what exactly I want, I want an application where I can add aliens, I can fetch aliens. So maybe I want to add new aliens. In aliens, I will be having two parameters. One is I'll be having the name of the alien, and then I will be having an ID for the alien. So just to show you that, I will need a class. I'll put that in a model package, and the class name would be alien. And in this class alien, I just need two things. One is AID, and the second thing is the name. And for this, we need getters and setters. And I also want to implement two string method here. So I will say, so we got two strings. So we got AID, a name, we got getters setters for that, and two string method. So this is the class I want to work with. Now what I want is I want a page where I will be able to add those values. So in the resources, in fact, inside main, I want a folder where I would call it as web app. And inside this web app, I will be creating a JSP. So I would say JSP, and I will name this JSP as home.jsp. This is where I will be putting my values. Now, what other fields I need? I need a form tag where I will be able to add those. I will be able to put those two values. So this we want, right? We want a form, and a user will enter two values, AID, a name. The moment I click on submit, it will call add alien, and this aliens will be added in database. And of course, we can create one more form where you can fetch data. And of course, if you can do adding, you can fetch data, you can fetch it by yourself as well, right? That will be your assignment. But I want to make it work. The moment I click on submit, it should be able to add alien. In fact, just to run this application, let's see what happens if I just run this code. So I would say Spring Boot, this project run as Spring Boot app. So let me open my browser, and I would say localhost :8080, and if I say enter, you can see it says page not found. And even if you try to access home.jsp, let's try that. And you can see we still got error because you need a controller to call that page, right? That's how Spring MVC works. You need to make it flow. And to do that, of course, we need a controller, and we have not done that yet. So let's build a controller here. So I'm basically trying to, create the basic stuff for us. New class, this will be a controller. And I would say this is alien controller. Name can be anything, doesn't matter. And I want to put this in a package called as controller. And inside this controller, I want to have a method. So I would say public string home, and this will return home.jsp. Now, when I want to call this method, first of all, I want to make this as a controller because without this, it will not work. And here I want to say at request mapping. And in this, I want to specify the path. So whenever I call the home page, it should call home.jsp. Oh, I missed one thing. It should be double quotes here. Okay, everything seems good. Now, if I run this project, let's see if it is working. So I will just relaunch the application and I will go back there and say enter. Oh, you can see it is still not working because we missed one thing. If you remember, we are yet to add the Jasper, right? When you are working with JSP, we need to add a POM file, which we need to add one more dependency, which is Jasper. And how do we get that? We just go to MVN repository, search for Tomcat Jasper. This is what you want. And out of this as well, I want 8.5.30. The problem is 8.5.31 is not working properly in my machine. So I'm using this one. That's fine even if you go for 3.1. Okay, it's done. And let me just relaunch it once again. I'll go back to my browser, and if I say enter, you can see we got a page, right? So this thing is working perfectly. It's very simple stuff, nothing fancy, right? So what is happening now is the moment you call, the moment you say home page, it is calling home.jsp. I mean, the moment I say slash, it is calling home.jsp. It's working perfectly. And now what I want is the moment I click on submit, it should take these two values and add it in database. But hold on, where's our database? Where's our table, right? That's a question. Now, first of all, how will your Spring Boot knows that you want to connect with H2? So H2 the database, right? Now, first of all, you need to enable H2 database because it is in-memory database, right? It's not external to your application. How will you enable it? And for that, we need to do some settings. Now, luckily, Spring Boot has a concept of auto configuration, and it will do the configuration for you. You just need to specify what you want. And the way you do that is by going to a resource. In this application.properties, you just need to set one property, which is spring.h2. Is it there? Yes, dot console. You just need to say enable equal to true. That's it. That's the first thing you do. Now, you need to also mention the platform where you're working with. So you have to say spring data source dot platform, and here you will mention H2. This is the platform you're working with. And one more thing, okay, the last thing, this is where you have to specify the URL. Example, when you want to work with any database, of course you have to specify the URL, right? And the way you do that is by saying spring dot data source dot URL equal to. Now the URL is jdbc colon h2 colon mem, and now you can mention any database you want. So I would say Naveen here. But how will I access the database? Because if you are using MySQL, you have an external application to work with, right? Here, what you will do is you will just restart the application or relaunch it. And the way you can access your H2 database is very simple. Just go back to your browser. I will not be using Maven anymore. So I will just come back here and I would say, hey, I want to access my console. The way you do that is by saying localhost colon 8080 slash h2 hyphen console. You just have to say h2-console. It will give you a login page. Now it will say driver name. It will specify JDBC URL. Now there is something which you have configured in your database, right? This is what in the application, this is what you have mentioned. The username, which is SA, don't change username, don't change the password because we don't need password there. And simply click on test connection. And you can see test successful, right? So you are ready to go ahead. Click on connect, and this is where your database is. Now this is your database, but you can see we don't have any tables yet. And of course we want a table, right? But how do you get a table? Now to get a table, you need to enable JPA, and you can see we have not configured JPA yet. Do we need to do that? Do we need to configure JPA? You just need to do one thing. In the annotation, you have to say at entity, and here you have to say at ID. This is the thing we need, right? We have to specify that that's an entity and this is the ID. Now to also make it work, first of all, you have to import the package. Now to make it work, we also need some data in the table, right? If you have a table, of course, you should be having some blank data. Now Spring Boot will give it to you. Spring Boot will create a table for you. First of all, let me just relaunch it. Let's just verify it is working before adding any data. So if I go back to the browser and if I say refresh, connect, oh, can you see that we got a table there? Awesome. We just said at entity and at ID, we got a table. That's the power of Spring Boot. And that's the power of Spring Boot auto configuration. Now let me just check if the data is there. So I will say select star from alien and I would say run. Oh, it's empty. You can see we got a table, but it is empty. I want to add some data. You can do it from here, or if you want some data pre-hand, what you can do is you can create a separate data file. You can say new, I will say a file, simple file, and I will name this file as data.sql. So we got data.sql there, and I will open that with a text editor. Okay, you can see we got this thing. Here you can write a statement to insert data. Okay, it's not compulsory, you can do it from the H2 as well. But every time you relaunch it, since this is a in-memory database, every time you relaunch the application, you might lose your data, right? So I would say insert into alien, I would say values, at least I want one data there. So I would say 101, and the name here I want is name, at least I want this data there. And after doing that, let me just relaunch it just to verify if data is coming there. I'll go back to browser. I will just simply copy this so that I don't have to type it again. I will refresh the database. I will say connect. You can see we got alien. If I say run this query, you can see that we got data. So your Spring Boot is actually loading that file at runtime. So you can write any number of SQL statement you want if you want to have that database to work with. Now what I want is I want to add some data, right? More data, not from here, but from the page. So what I will do is from the home.jsp, I will click on submit. It will call add alien. But if you can see, we don't have any controller who will accept add alien. So let's create one. So I would say public string, I would say add alien. And from here itself, again, I will call the same home page. I don't want to create any other page. I will call the same home page. Of course, when you say fetch aliens, then you can, create another page where you can display that data. And here I would say this should be called, so for that request mapping, and this should be called whenever you have a request for add alien. Now, since we are sending data there, now if you remember our last concept of model object, we will simply say alien here. So whatever data is coming from the client will be assigned here automatically. It's that beautiful, right? Okay, everything seems good. Everything seems good. But then how will you add data in database? If you remember, we need to write JDBC code, right? Or in JPA or in Hibernate, we need to have a repository link. We have to create a separate code using which you can add. We will do that here as well. Normally what you do is we first create interface and then we create a class which implements that interface. So let's create an interface first. So I would say new. I will not create a class as of now. Let me just create interface and I will call this as alien repo. Again, you can say alien DAO or repo, doesn't matter. And I want this to be in com.telesco.demo.dao. This is where I want all my repositories, and click on finish. Now this repository will have some methods, right? Which is normally we apply CRUD operations, right? We say create, update, delete, and all those stuff. Now, since we are using data JPA, Spring Data JPA, it gives you this awesome feature. So just be with me to see the magic. What I will do is I will simply extend this interface with another interface called repository. And we will say, hey, you are responsible to work with alien and the primary keys of type integer. That's it. You just need to mention the class name and the type of primary key. You will get all the CRUD operations. Now how it is working. So you can see if I click on CRUD repository, we have save method, we have iterable. So all these methods are declared here. Oh, that means we need to define them. Hold on, we'll not do that. What I will simply do is if you can see, I've just created the interface. In this interface, it is already extending CRUD repository, which has a lot of methods, and we are not implementing any method. In the alien controller, what I will do is I will simply create object of alien repo. I would say repo. I'm not creating a class, okay? Nowhere I'm creating a class here, which implements this repository. And I will simply say auto wired, because auto wired will instantiate it. It will look for the object of alien repository. And I have not created any class. I have not created any object. And that's the beauty about Spring Boot, because if it is working, then Spring Boot is awesome, right? So let's try. In fact, there's a feature of Spring Data JPA. Let's try. I will relaunch the application. I'll go back to the browser and I will refresh, say connect. Oh, first of all, I want to say select start from alien rust run. You can see we have only one data. And now I will try to add some more data. I would say 102. I would say Praveen, and I will click on submit. You can see submit has been done and we got the same page. Let's go back to database. Let's just to verify if this is working. Oh, it's not working. You can see we have still not added. Oh, because we have done one mistake, right? Even if I call add alien, you are not saving it, right? So you have to say repo.save alien. We missed one statement. How can I do that? Relaunch it, go back to the browser and click on, I will say simply send the same request, because in the URL we still have values. I would say enters, there is no error. Go back to the H2, run. I will just run. Oh, can you see that we got the second data? It's that easy, right? And if I show you the code once again, we have not done much, right? We have not written any JDBC code. This is the beauty about Spring REST. So what we have done is we have this home page from where when I click on submit, it goes to alien, add alien. This add alien is doing nothing much. It is fetching the value of the alien and it is saying repo.save. Now what is repo? Repo is the reference for alien repo. An alien repo is an interface. We are not implementing this interface anywhere. Spring Data REST is responsible to do that for you. So behind the scene, there are some classes which is doing it for you, right? Because you don't have to think about much about it. And of course, you can perform all the CRUD operations. But what if you want to do something else? Now that's a question, right? We will try to answer that question in the coming videos. But then at this point, this is working for you. So you can save, you can fetch, you can update, you can delete. All the methods are available. Just try it by yourself and it should work. So in the POM file as well, we have not done any changes much. We just added the Tomcat Jasper. And here you just need to add these three things. You have to enable your H2. You need to specify the platform and data source. That's it. Which is the URL. That's it. And this thing will work. In the last video, we have seen how do we create a simple Spring Boot application using JPA and H2. Now let's go ahead with the example. So whatever we have done till now is very simple. We are simply adding this alien data, and the moment you click on submit, the data goes to a controller. A controller will fetch those values in the alien object, and the same data will be saved in the database with the help of this alien repo. Now, thanks to Spring Data JPA, we have this concept of creating the interface and simply extending a CRUD repository. Normally what we do in databases is we create a separate class, and that class will have certain methods. And normally what you do is CRUD operations, right? Create, update, delete, and read. So we can do all those things. In fact, you don't have to write the code. Spring Data JPA makes this thing easy for you and says, hey, you don't have to worry about that. We have implemented all the CRUD operations. That's awesome, right? In fact, we have done only one thing till now, which is doing save. Now there are certain questions which you need to answer. Now if you can see this example, I have not used any service layer. So we have a controller, and controller is interacting with repo. So that's not how we write an application in the enterprise scenario, right? What we do is we also have a service layer. Now why do we need a service layer? Is because as a controller, we are always not sure that data is coming from database. Sometimes data is coming from the network. Sometimes data is coming from the input provided from the user. So we need to process something, and that processing should be done in the service layer. In case if data is coming from the repository, then service layer will interact with it with repository. So that's how we build application. But here, since we just wanted to explain about Spring Data JPA, I directly went with the repo. Okay, so once we got a repo here, and once we are able to say add, what if I want to fetch? In fact, before the video, I just made some changes from the last example. The first change is in the alien class, I have added one more field, which is tech. So we had AID, we had a name. Now I have also added tech, and I have added 5 values. So if I go to data.sql, you can see I have added 5 values instead of 1. I have run this application once. So if I go to my console, the H2 console, and if I say select star from alien, and if I run this code, you can see we got 5 records because I want to do some extra stuff, right? If I go back to my code, what else I want to do is I want to fetch the alien. So in the last example, I've just added the alien, right? What if I want to fetch an alien? It's very easy. You can create separate form for that. Of course, we should be dividing this line by something, but I'm not that good with designing, so let's ignore that. So I would say get alien. So I want to fetch an alien based on the AID. So I will not be doing any of this stuff. So simply AID. So the moment you type in AID and say submit, it should return an AID. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any controller which will accept that request. So I will copy this, and I would say this is get alien, and the method name will also be get alien. And this time I'm not expecting alien. Of course, I'm expecting a string which is called as AID. And if you want to map this, I will be using a request param. So request param is something using which you can, fetch the value from the client. Okay, so once I got the value, instead of saying save, I will be saying, okay, now what's the method I want to use here, and where do I store it? Okay, that's a question. In fact, we have one more question about home.jsp, which page I will be using now. I want to show records, right? So of course I need a separate JSP page, and that's the thing with with the Vue technologies. For everything, if you want to show something to the user, you need to create a separate JSP. Let me just do that. I would say this is show alien.jsp, and this need to be where? So show alien.jsp should be a part of web app. Okay, this seems good. And in this show alien, I want to display the data about alien. So what I will do is I will simply say dollar, and I want to send an alien. So this is what I'll be sending from the controller. Okay, so that's good. So here I would be saying alien, not alien, I would say show alien .jsp. So this is what I want to return. But with the view, I also want to send a data, right? So as we have discussed in the earlier videos, we can use a model and view here because it will make more sense. So I will be saying model and view mv is equal to new model and view. Of course, we need to import the package, and in the constructor itself, I will specify the view name. This is one way. You can also set the view name, or you can use a constructor to do that. And instead of returning a string, I will return mv. But in this mv, I also need, so with this mv, with this view, I also want to return the data. But from nowhere, I'm fetching data, right? Now think about this. When I say get alien by passing an AID, what do you think? How many aliens will get? One or many? Of course one, right? Because when you mention primary key, you will be getting only one ID or one object. So you will be storing that in an alien. So you will say alien is equal to repo dot. Now what should be the method name? Because save will save it. If you go down with that, you can also check exists by ID. We can check because this will return boolean if the object present there. But I don't want to check, I want to fetch. So it should be this method, which is find by ID. So find by ID, in which you have to mention the AID which you want to fetch. That's it. Now once you get this AID, find by ID will give you the object. Oh, okay, there is one issue here. The method find by ID is the current repository is not applicable for the argument string. Oh, I'm not returning, is it a string? Oh, my bad. AID is basically an integer, right? Of course, because it's an integer, so how can you write string? My bad. And once we have done that, it is still giving you an error. It says cannot convert from optional alien to alien. Now there's a beauty about Java 8, you know, Java 8 gives you this option of keeping it optional. Just to handle the null values, we normally use optional. So we have two choices here. One, you can make this optional as we can do in Java 8, or at the end you can say maybe or else you can return null. Again, not a good practice, but for this example it will work. Normally we should be using alien object or any blank alien object, or you should be using null. In fact, we can also say new alien. That will make more sense, right? Why to play with nulls anyway? Yeah, so now once we have this, values, we need to add that in mv. So I would say mv.add object, and I will add alien. That's it. It's that simple. This should work. How do I verify this? So let's relaunch the application and go back to the browser. Okay, not in the H2, of course. I want to go to the page. If I refresh, you can see we have this form, a separate form here, which is asking for the AID. I would say 101 and click on submit. Oh, it's working. Can you see that we got 101, Naveen, and tech is Java. Now same thing can be done for 104. Click on submit. You can see we got 104, Komal, and Java. Of course, not everyone is in Java. If I say 105, click on submit, you can see we got Rafiq and Android. Now the thing is, what if I say 106? Now 106 is not available in database, right? And that's why if you have returned null in else part, it will give you exception. But here, if I click on submit, you will say you will get blank object because we are returning a new object. What you can also do is you can create a fake object with fake data and you can return that. That's fine. You can do that. So once we have done with this is how you can fetch values. Can you update? Yes, you can. So that will be your assignment, you know. So create multiple methods. In fact, create multiple forms here for updating as well, and create multiple controllers. So we have, let's say, update alien, delete alien. And if you're thinking, do we have methods for that? Of course we have. Example, if I say repo dot, we have a method called as delete. We have a method called as delete all. In fact, we should be having option for update. Now in case of update, what you will do is you will delete the old record and you will save the new record. Or I guess even save will do it for you. So try it out. That will be your assignment because not everything I want to spoon feed you. So try it out because you will learn by experience. So that will be your assignment. Now see, all these things looks good, right? But I just have one concern. Can we do delete and update? Of course we can. And that will be the assignment, you know, how do we use delete and how do we use update. But I just have one query here. What if you have a complex query? Because this CRUD repository which you have here, it provides you all the basic CRUD features. What if you want to do something extra, something very different? Can we write our own methods? And the answer is yes. We can write our own methods. Example, let's say if you want to fetch, if you want to find elements, or if you want to find aliens based on, so whoever has a later in their name, can we do those complex queries? And the answer is yes. Again, how to do that we'll see in the next video. So whatever we have done till now is let me just relaunch the application just to see what we have done earlier. So I will go back to our browser and I will say localhost :8080. And the moment I send a request, you can see we are getting two different forms. And of course, I have not done it in a proper design. But the second one is for searching. Example, if I search for 101, if I click on submit, you will get data for alien 101. And if you give different data, you will get different stuff. Now in this video, what we're going to do is we'll explore some more ways to fetch the data, because you can see we are able to do CRUD operations, right? And that is perfectly working. But what if you want to do some, customized query? How will I do that? Example, let's say to just to simplify this, I will do one more thing. I will open my JSP page, which is home.jsp, and let me remove the first form because we don't need that as of now. We just want to fetch the values, right? So after making the changes, I will relaunch. So let's just to see how it looks like. And if I refresh, this is what you got. We got a simple text field and a button. Now what I want is, I want to fetch values, but not based on the AID. I want to fetch based on something else. So maybe I want to fetch based on the technology. So I don't want people who, in fact, let's keep it AID here. Doesn't matter what I enter here. What I do is in the controller, I just want to fetch, I want to try out different stuff. Example, maybe I want to fetch from the, based on the technology. So what I will do is I will print on the console itself. Let's say I want to print all the aliens who are learning Java or who is working on Java. So in that case, what I will do is I will say repo dot. Now, what do you think? Which method I will be using here? Because we have the methods like find by ID, which will give you only the alien with a particular ID. What if I want to search by a technology? Can we do that? Maybe something like this. Can I say find by tech? Because see, all the methods which we have used before, which is save, find by ID, delete, all these methods are predefined in your Spring Data JPA. How about find by tech? Do you think it's available? And you can see we are getting errors. Even if I type something here, if I say find tech by Java, it is still giving you an error. It's because it's not there. We don't have this method. Now, we don't have this method where? So if you see in the CRUD repository, we don't have that method. But ultimately, when you say repo.findByTech, it is searching in this alien report, right? All these methods are coming from CRUD repository. So find by tech is not available in this interface. What if I create one? Can we do that? Find by tech will give you a list of aliens. So we can say it returns a list of aliens. And the method name is find by tech. Let me just declare the method here. We'll see how do we implement this later. But as of now, let me just write this method here, which is find by tech. And here I would say string tech. Will this work? See, nowhere I have, so I'm not defining this method anywhere. I'm just declaring it. Is it your Spring Boot JPA or Spring Data JPA is so smart that it will be able to find the aliens by tech? Let's try it out. So what I will do is I'll just relaunch it and let's go back to the browser. It doesn't matter what I enter here. Example, even if I say 101, doesn't matter. It will fetch the name of the alien, but we are concerned about the console, right? So if I click on submit, the important data is in the console. Can you see that we got two people or two aliens, 101 and 104, Naveen and Komal both are working on Java. I mean, can you imagine that? Your Spring Data JPA is helping you with the query. So it's a magic, right? Now what is happening behind the scene? Can I do anything? Can I write any method name? Now you have to follow some protocols here. The protocol is the method name should start with find by or get by. So this is the option which they give you. So find by, get by. So let's say if I make a mistake here. So instead of having find by tech, if I make a spelling mistake by writing find by tech 1, you can see we are getting errors here. So method name should start with find by tech, find by, and then it should end with the name of the property. So tech is a property inside alien class, right? And that's why it is working. So if you can see alien class, we have tech as a property, and that's why you are able to search by tech. That's why tech 1 is not working. If I say TEC, even that will not work. So it should be tech. It's that simple, right? So this is how you can write your query. So you can do find by name, you can say find by tech. So this is one thing you can do. Can I do something else? Example, let's say I want to fetch the alien based on, let's say, AID. So of course we have that value, but let's say if I specify AID 102, I want all the aliens who has more than 102. It's something like greater than, right? Can I do that? So if I say system.out.println, I would say repo.find by AID. So I want to search based on that AID, but those values should be greater than that, right? So we will use a method name as greater than. This is the protocol again you have to follow. You have to say greater than, and then in this you have to pass any AID 102. So you have to mention find by, then you have to mention on by which attribute, which property, which is AID, and what you want to do, greater than, less than. So we'll go back to repo and let's define the same method here. List of alien, and it is find by AID greater than, and I would say this is int AID. Now this looks cool. I hope this will work, because if I make a mistake here, even if I say ID, it will not work. It has to be AID. Maybe GT works. Let's try. If I say, instead of saying greater than, if I say GT, or GT doesn't work. So it says invite delivered query, no property GT found by type int. It should be greater than. Okay, let's go with that. And then I will go back to my controller. Nothing to worry about here. Let's relaunch the application, and once it is done, let's go back to the form, and I will say enter. And you can see we got all the aliens. We got 103, we got 104 and 105. We have not got 102 and 101, because that's what we are doing here. We are saying greater than 102. So you can try it with less than as well. It should work. You know, there are some things which you have to try by yourself as always. Okay, now I want to do one more thing. So let's say if I go to the repository, I want to, let's say there is a complex query now, because this thing looks cool. But in real application, we do write complex queries. What if I want to write my own query? Is it possible? And the answer is yes, you can define your own queries. Now the way you do that, example, let's say I want to find by tech, but then all the values should be sorted. Okay, so they have to be sorted by name. So I will find by tech, I will say Java, but the values should be sorted based on names. So we can do that. We can say find by tech, and we can have any method name after that, because see, if I say sorted, this is not actually a valid name, because if I say list alien, so you can see this is not a valid name. Even if I pass a tech here, this is not a valid name, and that's what it's saying. But since we are writing our own query, so the name doesn't matter. So what we will do here is we will mention, hey, I want to write my own query. And this query would be, so in the double quotes, you have to mention the query. Now, which query? Are we going to write SQL query here? Normally when you work with JPA, of course, you will be using JPQL. Now, if you have not learned JPQL before, it's almost same as HQL. And if you have not worked on HQL before, it's similar to SQL with some changes. Example, in SQL, we say select star from table, but in JPQL, we simply say it's from, because select star being a boilerplate code, we don't need that. So what we'll do is we'll say from alien. Now here you have to mention where tech, because we are filtering, right? So I want to check by tech. So I will say tech is equal to, now the value is coming from the user, right? So in that case, you will be using question mark. But in JPQL, we also use the question mark numbers, because in a query, you might have multiple question marks. So you have to mention the number there. And then you will say order by a name, because you want to sort based on the name. Okay, this looks cool. This is how you write your complex query. You can write any complex query you want. You can pass multiple parameters. So you can give a comma here, and you can pass 3 to 4 parameters. It will work. Okay, this looks good. Now from here, I will say system.out.println repo.find by tech sorted, and I want to sort based on Java again, so that you can compare with the first output and the output it will give you. So let's relaunch it. And just for the formality, I will say enter here. Ultimately, we need to check the console. Now, if you look at the console, see the output. It is 104 and it is 101. That means they are sorted based on the name. So it is Komal and Naveen. So K comes before N. So that's what you can do. So yes, Spring Data JPA works like a magic. So basically, it's a library which helps you to get the stuff you want, right? You just need to mention the method names. It will work for you. Till this point, what we have done is we have created simple application where a user can fetch aliens and user can add aliens. Now, if you want to see what we have done till now, it's very simple. Let's go back to the browser and we'll say localhost colon 8080. Here you will get a form where you will search for, let's say 102. When you click on submit, you got the alien data. It's perfectly working, right? Now, this is how you implement Spring MVC, where data is fetched with the help of Spring Data JPA. And just to show you the code, what we have done, it's very simple actually. We have a controller and we have a controller which is get alien, and you are mapping with the slash get alien where a user is passing a AID, and based on that you are fetching the value. In fact, just for the experiment, we have done these methods here as well. Let's remove them. We don't need for this next example. And in this repo as well, let me just empty it. I don't want anything else apart from the AID. Now what I want is, if I go back to the browser, look at this URL. Now, of course, when you use a website, when you use a web service, we have different kind of clients, right? So we have human clients where they will interact with the help of browser. But sometimes we provide a service to another services. Example, maybe I want to fetch the data about an alien, but the thing which is fetching the data is not a human, it's a machine itself. So one service is trying to access another service. Now they will not be communicating with the help of HTML and CSS, all those stuff. They will be using some different format like XML or JSON. And that's where we use web services, right? And one of the best way to implement web service is REST. Now, if you follow the architecture of REST, what it simply says is, instead of having this get alien $AID is equal to 102, what makes more sense is to say your website name slash alien slash and whatever alien you want, let's say 102. Now this makes more sense, right? Because it looks like you are accessing a resource. So all this data is been there on the website, and the moment you say enter, you should get the data. So the URL which we are expecting here is alien/102. Now, if you're not familiar with REST API, I would recommend you to watch my REST API series, or maybe at least 1 or 2 videos just to get the gist of it. So you will find the link in the description area. Now in the REST API, what you do is you say your website name slash what you want to fetch, a resource which is alien in this case, and you will specify the ID. Maybe you don't want to specify the ID. When you say alien, it simply means you want all the aliens. Or maybe you can also say aliens. Maybe I will say 102. Maybe you want to fetch something else. You want to fetch people, or you want to fetch alien who work on Java. So you can say /Java. Maybe you want to fetch something else. You want to fetch about laptops. So you can simply say laptops, right? It will give you data about laptops. But here I want to implement this. I want to say alien/101, or maybe I want to fetch aliens first. The moment I say enter, I want to see all the aliens. The way you implement that is very simple actually. Instead of using normal request mapping, we will be using REST. So here you will say aliens/aliens, that's it. It will call it. Now there's one change. Now when you say web services, of course we will not be using JSP. So of course we don't need a model and view object. What I just need is data, right? When you say data, in which format I will return it? So time being, I don't know which format. By default, every format is string, right? Even if you say JSON or XML, they are string format. So we'll say string. The method name I will say get aliens just to make it attractive. And it will not be expecting any value. So no parameter. And I want to fetch all the aliens. Okay, so how do we return the value here? It's very simple actually. You say return repo dot. Now there's a method called as find all. So find all will give you all the aliens, and this is a part of your repository, right? Which is your code repository. Now there's one problem. When you say find all, it returns a iterable, and what you are saying is string, right? Now in this case, you need to convert this into string. So you will say dot toString. So you are converting an iterable to a toString. Now still we have one problem. It will not work. Now when you implement Spring MVC, by default, when you say string, it is expecting that, when you say return string, it will expect that you are returning a view name. But no, we are not returning a view name, right? We are returning a data. In that case, you will be saying response body. So we are informing our dispatches servlet, hey, I'm not returning a view name, I'm returning actual data. So don't try to search for the view name, just print whatever is there in the response. Your Spring Dispatch Servlet says, okay, I will do that for you. So let's relaunch the application. And if I go back to the browser, and here if I say aliens enter, can you see that we got our data? And of course, it doesn't look good, but we will try to do that because this is not even JSON, this is not even XML, this is just a list format in a string. We'll try to use JSON and XML in upcoming videos, but as of now, let's stick to this. So important thing here is we are able to fetch all the aliens. So this is like a REST URL. But what if I want to say alien/102? I want to fetch one resource. If I say enter, it's not working. In that case, I will create another method just to show you how it works. I will say enter and paste it here. And the URL is alien, right? So alien102, simple. And the method name would be getAlien and nothing much. I will say find. So this time I will say repo.find, and this will be find by ID, which is 102 in this case. And that's it. It's so simple. It should work. Oh, it's not working. There's an error. We have to convert that into a toString. So you will say .toString. Okay, once it is done, let's refresh. Go back to the browser and say enter. Oh, it's working. Can you see that? We got our data. But now if I change it to 103, oh, we got an error. That means we need to create another method for 103. Hey, that doesn't make sense, right? If you have 100 records, you will not be creating 100 methods. So what I will do is I will put that as a wildcard. So I will put that in curly brackets. I would say this is AID, and this is how it works. You know, whenever you want to keep as a wildcard, you say curly brackets AID, and you will accept that AID here. So I will say int AID, and you will pass the AID. So that means you are making it wildcard. So it doesn't matter if a user says 102 or 103, depending upon the value, it will fetch the data for you. So let's relaunch it. Go back to the browser, say enter. There's one more thing here. We need to use an annotation here which is called as param variable, which it's path variable actually. So we have to use a path variable, and we have to say AID is equal to AID. So whatever data is coming from here will be assigned here. Now let's verify. And if I go back to the browser, say enter, oh, it's working. Can you see that? It's working. So when you say 102, it's working. 103 is working. If I say 104, it's working, right? So it is working for all the values. So that's how you send a request. Okay, so get is working. So that means I'm able to fetch all the values. What if I want to submit values? What if I want to create an alien and send it to server? Now, of course, I need to create a form, but that will be HTML. We have to create a form, right? What if I want to send data in JSON format? And in fact, here as well, I want to fetch data in JSON format. We are not doing that. How will I do that? That we'll see in the coming videos. Till this point, what we have done is we were able to create a resource. So when a user is asking for aliens, we will return a JSON or a list of aliens. And when a user is asking for a particular alien, you will return that particular alien. So we are trying to implement REST here. So if I go back to the browser, if I say page, okay, so if I say aliens, it should return the list of aliens, and we are getting that. And if I ask for a particular alien, let's say 102, we should be getting that. Now I just have one concern here. The concern is I want this data in JSON format, right? Normally that's how we share data, either JSON or XML. The data which you are getting on a screen is not appropriate, right? How will another service understand what you're sending? Now in that case, we need to convert our response in JSON format. Spring should be doing that by itself, right? Why we have to do something? Now if you look at the code, we have made some mistakes, not exactly a mistake, but then it's not proper. Now the first change I want to make is instead of having code repository, let's use JPA repository so that we'll get some extra features, because JPA repository is an interface which extends paging and sorting repository, which indirectly extends code repository. So we have all the features of code repository plus extra features. Now when I say extra feature, this is what I want, you know. When I say find all, it should return a list, because in code repository it returns iterable. So let's go back here in the controller, and so we have made that change. Okay, let's talk about this one. When I say find by ID, it will return you an alien, right? So what if you don't convert that into string? Let's keep it alien. Now the only thing which it will ask you is to change the return type from string to optional alien, and that's what we will be doing. So we'll be converting the return type from string to optional alien. Now when you say optional alien, if you have not gone through Java 8 videos, that's fine. It simply returns an alien object, but in case if you don't have the data, it will return optional data. Now here we will say, again, we will remove toString. So we'll say find all, but then here we'll not be keeping it as string. We will be keeping it as alien, list of aliens. So once we have this code here, let's relaunch the application and go back to the browser. So we'll ask for aliens, and yes, we are getting list of aliens. And look at the format now. This is a JSON format, right? And what if I want only one alien? Let's say 103. You got the alien, right? You got the alien in JSON format. So this is working. So we are able to get the data in JSON format. Okay, now what are the things we need? What if I want to submit this data, and how exactly we will be saying this in a particular format? Now, if you have a Mozilla Firefox, it does look good in when you have a JSON, it does look good there. Otherwise, if you want to submit some data, because of course you will be sending data from client to server as well, right? And the format would be JSON. How will I create JSON here? And in REST API, we have some other methods as well, like we have delete and update. How will you perform those operations? And that's where we will be using a client for doing that. And one of the very famous client which we all use is Postman. So we will be using Postman to do further stuff, you know, how to send data, how to fetch data, and how exactly to use this, that we'll see in the next videos. In the next video, we'll try to submit data, we'll try to fetch data, and we will also try with XML. You know, we have not done XML yet. It's only JSON here. So how exactly that works, that we'll see in the upcoming videos. But before that, just to go for a quick recap, whenever you say find all, it simply fetches the list from the database and it returns you to the client. But hold on, there is one question. When you say it returns a list, who is responsible to convert that into JSON? Because we have not done that, right? We should have been done somewhere, you know, converting Java object into JSON. Now, thankfully, in the Maven dependencies, if you can expand, we have a jar file here which is called as Jackson. Can you look at that? Here it is. So if you can see, we have Jackson code. Now this is responsible to convert your Java object into JSON. Yeah. So we can also use other libraries if you want JSON or whichever you like, but by default Spring Boot go for Jackson. Now till this point, everything was working perfectly, right? But then we need something here, because when we were fetching these values, example, if I say, hey, I want an alien with 103, we got JSON value. But then normally if you want to fetch value, you can do that with browser. What if you want to send a JSON? How will you do that? And what if you want to delete a resource and update a resource? In that case, you will be needing a client. Now one of the client which we can use here, which is very famous, called as Postman. Now using Postman, you can send a API request, you can fetch data, and you can do a lot of stuff. So we'll jump to this Postman app. So normally, initially, Postman app was available as a Chrome extension, but now they recommend you to install the app. So when I click on Postman apps, you can see for different platforms, they have different setup here. Initially, it was only one for Chrome. Now you can see we have Postman for Mac and for Windows, for Linux. Now since I'm using Mac, I'll be clicking on this. If you are using Windows, of course, you'll go for download, and for Linux, we have download there. Now we'll click on download here. So it should get downloaded and you can install it. It's very easy actually. So it is getting downloaded. We'll wait for some time. So it is getting unzipped. So when I clicked on the Postman app or the download, it will give me a pop-up, and then we'll say, okay, move to application folder, yes. So we got our Postman here, so it is getting open, and we got a sign up. Now, of course, you will be doing a sign up. I guess it is free account. Initially, there was no sign up, but then after, once they got popular, they are asking you to sign up. I'll sign in with Google. On this page, what you will simply do is, this is where you will send a request, and this is where it will maintain the history of your request stuff. Now, again, it will take some time for you if you are new to Postman, how to access all the features here. Now we'll go step by step. It's very easy actually. Just go to, so this is a place where you will send a request. You can send any request, doesn't matter which page. Is it a HTML page or a JSON resource, doesn't matter. We'll go for Google, www.google.com, and when you send a request, you will get a response, and this is your response. Odd, right? The thing is, this is your HTML page, this is a Google page. The only thing is, it's not a browser, it's a client using which you can fetch JSON data, using which you can send JSON, not just JSON, but XML as well. So this is basically a REST call API or client. Now this is where you will get the response, right? There's a place where you'll get the response. Now, of course, when you say google.com, that's why you're getting this stuff, right? What if you send a request which you are sending on a browser? So if you can see, this is the request which we were using, right? Which is localhost colon 8080/alien/103. Now, when you click on send, you got your JSON, and it is in JSON format, right? It looks cool now because this is a proper JSON format. In fact, if you send a request for aliens, you can say this is an array of JSON. So this is a JSON object, which is an array itself, and then we got multiple JSON object inside that. Now, what if you want to send different type of requests? Let's say post, get, delete. How will you do that? So there's an option here. So you can see we have get, we have post, we have put. There are so many options available, right? We will be seeing delete and put later. But as of now, get is something we will be using. And when you send a request, you will get a get request. Now, can I specify, hey, I don't want to use JSON, I want to use XML. Now there's a concept of content negotiation. Again, we'll talk about that later. But yes, we have an option to do that. So you will go to headers and you will mention whatever data you want. This is where you will mention the header, whatever data you want, whatever data you are sending to the server, you can specify all that here. Now we also get this status thing, which is 200 OK. If there's any error, let's say resource not found, it will send 404, which is your favorite. Response time, everything is available here, So this is the best place you can test your APIs. What if you want to send some data? So let's say if you want to send some data, you will use a post request, and this is where you will send data. So everything is available. Again, we'll be doing that a lot in the subsequent tutorials. But as of now, in this video, the important thing was how to use a Postman and how to download it. So in the last video, what we have done is very simple. Actually, we have installed Postman and we were trying to fetch the data from the server. Now the data type was JSON, right? We got a JSON data as of now. But then when you talk about web services, we have different formats. One is JSON, the second one is XML. And people still use XML. And what if you want to use XML? Because by default, you are getting JSON, right? Now, of course, when you have a web service, you need to provide both the formats. In fact, there's a concept of content negotiation. Now, what is content negotiation? As a server, you have options of providing data in different formats like XML, PDF, or JSON. Now, as a client will request different type of data. Let's say client says, hey server, I want JSON. Now, server will send a JSON data. What if a client says, hey, I want XML? A server will send XML data. So data will be same, but the format will change. Now, what do you think? Do we have an option on our server side that we will only provide JSON? What if a server says, hey, I will not be providing PDF, I will not be providing XML? Can we do that? And the answer is yes. That's where we have a concept of content negotiation, where a client will specify what they want and server can say, hey, this is not available. Or, when client says JSON, server says, okay, I have a JSON, take it. How will I do that? Now, first of all, let's go back to Postman, and since our service is running, let me just relaunch the application once, and I'll go back to my Postman. Now, if you can see, this is the request which we have sent last time, right? I will do the same thing again. I will click on send. Now you got JSON, right? By default, Spring Boot provide you JSON. Now, what if I want to specify, hey, I don't want JSON, I want to work with XML. Now, will server provide that? Let's try. Now, in order to request for XML data, what you will do is, in the headers, when you see this page, there's an option of header. In the header, you have to mention, I will only accept. So there's a key which is accept. Again, you don't have to by heart all this stuff, it will give you suggestions. But the moment you start working on stuff, you will get different types. So we have accept, and in this accept, you have to mention, hey, I want XML. In fact, by default is JSON, right? So if you want JSON, you can type JSON here. So it is application/JSON. If you want XML, you will simply type XML, and in this you will select application/XML. Now, once you have specified that, click on send. That means you are requesting for XML. And if you see the body, it's empty. Unfortunately, XML is not working. But what went wrong? Look at the status here. And that's why the status are very important. So how do I mention that in Spring Boot? Now, we were thinking Spring Boot will be awesome, right? It provides so many features, and now Spring Boot says, hey, I don't support XML. That's weird, right? Now the thing is, in the modern world, we are using JSON a lot. Most of the services are based on JSON. Not a lot of people, they use XML. And that's why Spring Boot by default supports JSON. What if you want to add a support for XML? That's a good thing. You can add a support. Now to do that, you need to go to your pom.xml file, and this is where you will add a dependency for XML. Because if you see Maven dependencies, as we have talked in the last session, that we have a Jackson code. Now this is responsible to convert your normal object into JSON, right? You can see we have JSON added, but then there's no XML converter here. So we have to add that. Now where you will get that and what's the name of the converter? So you have to go to your Maven repository as usual. So I will type mvn repository, and here I will search for Jackson data format XML. Now this is the first link which you have to click. This is the link. Now which version to select? Now to verify this, which version you want, just go back to your package manager or package explorer, and here you will find the version of Jackson which we are using for any Jackson, which is 2.9.6. So just to make it compatible, we will go for the same version for data format. I will click on 2.9.6. I don't want to comment. I'll copy this code, go back to your code and paste. Now this is where you are adding a support for XML. Okay, it should work now. Let's go back, let's relaunch the application once, and we'll go for Postman now and click on send. Oh, something went wrong. Maybe the server has not started properly. So now you can see when you send a request, you got XML, and finally we got an XML, right? So if you now it supports both. If you say I want XML, it will give you XML. If you say JSON, it will give you JSON. So whatever format you want, it will give you that. And in both the cases, you will get a status of OK because your server now supports both. So click on send, it's working. So this is the power of content negotiation. Depending upon client, you can send a response. So you are sending both. A client will say, okay, I want XML, I want JSON. So that's how it works. Now, what if I want to modify on the server side? I don't want to provide JSON. I only want to provide XML. Can we do that? Can we restrict? Because Spring now supports both, right? So whenever I send a request for JSON, this should not work. So this is what I want. So when I click on send, it should not work. I want to provide only XML. Now in that case, I will go back to my code and okay, what are the changes we have to make? So this is the method which we are using, right? Get aliens, and when you send a request for aliens, this is what it will be calling. Now to do that, to restrict it, we need to add one more attribute. So normally this aliens is an attribute of path. So by default, when you don't specify the attribute name, it is path. The second attribute which you have to use here is called as produces. So you can mention what it produces. And in the curly brackets, you can mention, hey, this one only produce. So I will say double quotes, application slash XML. So this will produce only XML. This method is not going to produce JSON. Because if you don't mention that, by default produce both. But what if you want to restrict? So you can mention, the moment you mention XML, it will only support XML now. It will not support JSON. Let's verify. Let's relaunch the application. And here if I click on send, so you can see JSON is not working now. We also got an error. It says status 406 not acceptable. So this is the power of, we have a power on the server side with what format to support. So when you say XML, it will only support XML now. So everything looks cool, right? It's very beautiful. Whatever we have done makes sense. Now, what if you want to send data? Because at this point, we are only fetching data, right? What if you want to send data? Now, what I want is in my database, if you can see, we only have 5 to 6 records. Maybe I want to add more because when I say get aliens, of course, the JSON is not working. So we'll go for XML. So XML and click on send. You can see we have these records. We have 5 records. I want to add one more. And I will be sending data in a JSON format. And for that, I just want to support it to use, okay, let me just say 103. And okay, I want JSON for this one because we have restricted only for one method, right? So this should work with this. So you can see we got JSON for this request because we have restricted only for aliens. Now I want to create a resource. I want to create a new resource. So I want to say 106. Maybe name would be Priyanka and the tech is, let's say, Android, or maybe machine learning. How will I do that? So that we'll see in the next video. In the next video, we'll see how do you send data to the server and how it will be accepting it on the server side and how it will be saving it. So till this point, what we were achieving is we were able to fetch data from the server and we were able to see that on Postman. So we tried using JSON and then XML. In this video, what we are going to do is we will be posting data on the server. So we'll be using a post request to send data from a client to the server. Now in HTTP, we have different methods. We have get for fetching data, we have post for submitting data, we have put to update data, and we have delete to delete data, of course. Now we'll use a post here. So before that, what I will do is I will remove this reduces because I want to support both now. I want to work with get as well. I want to work with JSON as well as XML. In fact, you can, in the produces itself, you can give a comma here and you can mention JSON, but let's remove that, it will support both now. Now, after doing that, what I want is I want to send data on the server. So when I say I want to send data, how will I do that? So I will go back to my Postman. Now, whenever you want to send a data, you will use the same URL. First of all, you will use a URL, which is alien. Now I know it's confusing, right? Because we already have a URL, which is alien, where you are passing the ID as well. The difference between the new URL, which we are going to use now, and the old one is the type of request. So we'll use again, it will be clear in some time. So we'll use a post request now, and I want to send a data. Now, how do you send a data? So to send a data, we will be using a body here. So there's an option of body in which you will mention the data. Now, of course, we have three attributes, right? We have AID, we have a name, and tech. Now to do that, we have multiple options. You can use a form data, we can use raw, or we can use binary format. I'll be using a raw format here. Okay, in fact, we can also use form data. Let's try with form data first. Now in form data, you have to specify the key and a value pair. Example, we'll say AID, and the value I want to go for is 106. And then we have another key in which we have a name, which is, let's say in this case, I will mention Priya. And then we have tech, and I would say machine learning. So we have these three attributes, right? We have three attributes and we have three values. Now, how will I send data? So first of all, it's a post request. This is the URL, and then I will click on send. Okay, I got an error. It says 404. Of course, right? We have not done anything on server side, so resource is not available. So we don't have anything which will accept the request. So I will go back to my server. Now in this, we need to create a method which will accept it. Now in this case, we will be using the same method here, okay, which we have used before. Now there will be some change in URL. Example, the URL here will be alien. Now if you look at these two URL, both are alien, right? So both are for alien, but there's one difference. This will be for get request. This is for post request, and this is for get request. Hey, how will I mention that? In order to mention that, we will be using a separate, in fact, we have an option here. We can specify comma and then we can mention method type. But in the new Spring option, we have another option which is post mapping and get mapping. So here we can use a post mapping, and whenever you want to go for a get request, you can use get mapping. By default is get, but it's better to mention get mapping, post mapping. It makes more sense. Now there's one more thing, if you don't want to mention response body every time, because if you are building a REST application, you don't need to mention response body every time. You just need to do one thing. Instead of using controller, we will be using a REST controller. Now REST controller simply means that all the methods will be working for REST. It will be sending a JSON or XML response, and then it will be working with RESTful API, or it will be a RESTful API. Okay, so those things are done. So we are sending alien request, and it will accept an alien. Now we don't want to return a page. We just want to return, the same data which we got. So I will say I want to send the same data which I got. So I will return the alien itself. That's it. We are accepting the data, and then we are adding the data in a database and then sending it. Will this work? Let's try. So what I will do is I will just launch the application. So let's go back to the Postman, and here if I click on send again, Oh, it's working. Can you see that? We got the response back, the same data. Okay, but is it there on the server in the database? Let's verify. I will go back to my browser. So if you remember, in order to access your database, we will use h2-console. We'll say connect. Okay, so let's fire the query. And it's there. Can you see that? We got 106, we got Priya and ML. Yeah, it's there in the database. So it's working. In fact, we can also verify by sending a GET request. We can say alien/106. Is it there? Yes, it is there, right? So there are multiple ways of verifying it. So that's how you send a data. In fact, you can send a data directly using, so let's say if I go back to the body and if I say, hey, I don't want to use form data, I want to go for raw data, you can do that. You can type a JSON. In fact, I'm lazy here, so I will just use one of the best feature, copy paste. And I will say this is 107 and we'll use a name as Gordon and we'll use a technology, let's say robotics. Okay, and in this case, I will click on send. Okay, we got an error, it's not working. What went wrong here? Okay, so what went wrong? In fact, if you observe the database, it is inserting 0, null and null. Now, in this case, when you use a raw data, what you have to also do is, on the server side, so we have to use one of the annotation which is called as request body. So when you are sending using as a raw data, which is JSON, normally that's how you do it, right? That's how you work on web services. You send a raw data. So we have to use a special annotation called as request body just to enable it. So let's relaunch the application and open Postman and click on send. So when I click on send, you can see we got one more error. Now we have to change one more thing. So instead of sending a text, we are sending a JSON. That's what we have to mention. So we'll select JSON here, click on send, and it's working. You can see we got AID as 107, we got A name as Gordon and tech as robotics. So data is getting added. We can verify from database, it will work. In fact, we can say 107 and let's send a GET request just to verify if it is there. And it's there. Can you see that we got the response? So it is there. Nothing wrong, everything is working. If I go back to my server, what if I want to specify what type of data I'm consuming? Maybe I don't want to consume, because see, when you say produces and consume, so these are two different words we have to remember. Whenever you send data from a server to a client, so a server is producing, right? So that's a produce. When a server is accepting data from a client, that is consumes. Okay, so we have to remember those two words. So whenever you accept data from a client, in that case, you can mention what type of data you want to accept. So you can mention, so this is for path. Then we can give a comma, then we can say consume. So you can specify what you want to consume. So you can say, hey, I want to consume only JSON. So you can say application.json. And now when you send data in XML format, it will not work. So this is how you consume data on the server side. So everything works, the get is working, the post is working. What about update and delete? That we'll see in the upcoming video. So what we have done till now is very simple. If I go back to my Postman and if I send a URL, so in fact, first of all, let me just run this application. So I will say run. So go back to the Postman and here I would say localhost :8080/aliens. Now when I request for aliens, you got all the aliens which are there in the database, right? In fact, whatever aliens we have added in the last session, now since we are relaunching the application, you will lose all the data because we are using in-memory database. Of course, you can use external database like MySQL or Postgres, but as of now, this is working perfectly. Now, get is working, post is working. So we were able to send data, we were able to fetch data. What about updating? What about deleting? So let's try deleting first. So I want to delete this data, which is let's say 104 Komal Java. I want to delete this data. Now to delete a data, of course, you will be selecting a delete operation. So you want to delete data there. And then here you will also mention the ID. So I will say alien/ I want to delete 104. So you have to provide your primary key or whatever field which is unique, of course, right? Normally it is always a primary key. So when you say 104, that means you are deleting a record which has an ID as 104. And the moment I click on send, you will get an error. Where is that? There is no error. Oh, it says okay. That's weird. Let's verify. Let's verify by going to the browser. And as usual, we will be using our H2 console to verify that. And I'll be firing a query here. Okay, so you can see data is still there and it is not getting deleted. So if you are getting data, it should be deleting, right? So it's not working. So delete operation is not working properly. So let me just try once again. I don't know what went wrong there. I'll click on send. Okay, you're not getting any error, but it is not working, right? Now, in order to perform a delete operation on the server side, there should be a mapping, right? We don't have any mapping here. So what I will do is I will create another mapping. So I would say public. I will return an alien and I will not name this method as delete alien. Now, while you are accepting, you will accept AID and that will be path variable for you. And here I want to return an alien, but from where you will get the alien? Of course, from using a get method, right? So first you have to check, do we have that method before deleting? So I would say repo dot. So first let's fetch the object, right? So if I pass AID here, we will get that particular alien, right? So I would say alien A is equal to, so we are getting a reference of that, and let's at the end return that as well. And then here we'll perform a delete operation because see, of course we have to return, right? So we will let a user know what is getting deleted. We want to delete it, right? So I will say repo dot, there is a method which is called delete in which you have to pass the object. So you have to pass the alien object, okay? So we are passing that. So you can see we have a alien A and we are passing A here. We are returning the same alien. Okay, now what should be the mapping? Should I use request? Of course not, right? Request is for, in request you have to mention what type of method you are working with. Should I use get mapping? No, that is for get. And you guessed it right, we will be using a delete mapping. And in this you will mention, whenever the request comes for alien. Now look at this, we have delete where we have the, in fact this method, it has a URL alien, this is also alien. And this is also alien. The difference is the type of request we are working with. So this is delete, this is get, and this is get, and this is also get, but then this is post. So what is missing here? So we have to say AID, right? We have to mention that which ID you want to delete, right? So that was a mistake. So let's relaunch it. So we learn from our mistakes, right? Okay, let's go back to the Postman and now click on send. Oh, we got an error. It says, so I guess what is going wrong here is, now since we are deleting the data, of course the object will vanish, right? And when you are saying you have this A here, this is still in a persistent state. And that's why when you try to delete that data, it is lost, right? And once you have lost the data, how can I return that? I guess that's the issue. Again, we'll do more research on this later, but this is what we are facing now. So time in what I will return is, I will say, deleted, that's it. And here we'll say string so that at least we'll get some response. So relaunch it and I will go back to my browser just to verify whatever we have done is working, and I will click on send. Oh, it's working, we got deleted. So we are here in the browser. Let me just copy this query and run, and you can see we don't have that 104 now. So that was the issue. Once the object gets deleted, you cannot access it, right? Because it was in the persistent state. So that was my bad. So this is how we work with a delete method. What about update? How do you update data? Now in that case, I will go back to my Postman. In case of update, what you do is we use a put method. Now when you say put, it simply means you want to update the existing data, and you can also create a new resource. Okay, so in post, we only create a resource. In put, we have a choice. If the data is available, it will get updated, and if the data is not available, it will be getting created. Now in that case, I will go back to the body. First of all, I want to fetch some dummy data. I will fetch 105 because I'm lazy. So I will just copy this and I want to update the same data. So I will say put, go back to the body and I will paste it here. Now the data which I want to update is Rafiq has moved from Android to iOS, and we are sending a JSON request. Okay, that should work. The moment I click on submit, okay, we got the same response, but is it updated on the server? You can see no, from the server we are getting Android. Okay, so it's not working. So we don't have a method there, right? So I will go back to my STS, and here I will create another method for update, and this would be put mapping, and we'll say path is equal to /alien, the same stuff. But this time we will be accepting the object, right? It is same as post, So what we can also do is we can simply copy this code as it is, because this is what you are going to do, and paste for put. The only change you will be doing is the method type, which is from post to put, And here, instead of saying add alien, we'll say update alien. Or maybe we can say this is save or update alien, because if it is there, it will be updated. If it is not there, it will create a new alien. And we'll say save alien and return alien. Let's verify if it is working. So what I will do is I will relaunch the application. So put basically means update, okay? So it is create or update. Once we have done that, go back to the browser or go back to the Postman. We are not supposed to pass 105, right? It is supposed to be localhost colon 8080/alien because we are not passing any ID. Okay, so that's the only thing you have to consider. So if I run this code, you can see we got updated value, which is iOS. And now if I go back to database just to verify, let's fire the query and you can see that we got Rafiq as iOS developer. So that's how we can update. And what if you don't have a resource? Let's say if I will go for a put here, and then we'll create a new data. Let's say again Priya, because we don't have Priya in the database now. So I will say ML and click on send. You can see it works. We got the response, and if I go back to database just to verify, Priya is there, right? So it is save or update, and that's how you use put. So that's it. We have worked with get, post, put, and delete, right? Okay, now I just have one thing. Now let's think about it. What we are trying to do here is we are creating a REST application which can do CRUD operations. Now what if I make this work more easy? I mean, think about this controller. If you look at this controller, it is doing nothing, right? It is simply accepting the request and calling the methods, that's it. Now don't you think if you have a controller which is only accepting the request and calling the methods, we don't even need this controller? What if the request is directly getting accepted by this repository? That will be awesome, right? As a developer, you don't even have to create this entire file. Just imagine. Now I know you'll be saying it's impossible, but wait, in the next video, I will show you how do we do that. In fact, let me just reveal the surprise. The concept name is Spring Data REST. So in Spring Data REST, we don't have to use MVC. That means we don't have to use a controller, and that will be awesome. In this video, we will talk about Spring Data REST. Now, trust me, Spring Data REST is magic. Now, to understand that magic, let's go for the previous example, which we were doing in the previous series. So what we have done till now is, in fact, we'll be doing the same thing, but with the help of Spring Data REST. And trust me, it is damn easy to work on. So what we have done is, we wanted to fetch all the aliens. Now, what is alien? Basically, alien has three properties: AID, ANAME, and tech. And then we have a database where I have inserted some values. In fact, we have this data.SQL, so I have inserted these values in the database. Now let's say if I want to fetch an alien, if I want to add new aliens, what we need is a controller, right? So whenever you send a request goes to the controller. Now depending upon what type of request you are sending, if you are sending a GET request, this will be getting called. So this is for GET request, this is for fetching all the aliens, and this is for put, which is update basically. Then we have post, and then we have delete. So what are the files we need? We need a controller, then we need a repository using which you can perform the operations. And thanks to Spring Data, we got this feature where you don't have to write much code. So everything is working perfectly, right? But then think about this controller. So normally when you work on Spring MVC REST, you need to create a controller. And if you look at this controller, it doesn't make any sense, right? Because this controller is simply accepting the request and is performing the operation. So I want to do the same thing but without controller. Is it possible? And the answer is yes, and that's where we have Spring Data REST. So let's implement that. So what I will do is I will just close all the windows here and let's start from scratch. So I will close this project and let's create a new project. So I will right click here, I will say new Spring Starter project, and we'll name this project as Spring Data REST. And then we'll click on next. Now when I say Spring Data REST, what are the modules which I need? Now first of all, we need database, right? So of course we will be using H2. We don't have a choice, right? We need database, maybe MySQL or H2. Now since we are just testing it, so embedded database will make more sense. We need JPA because of course we need repository. And we need REST repository. Again, I have worked on the project before, that's why I'm getting this frequently accessed area. But in case if it is not there in your setup, don't worry, just search for it here. Example, if I search for REST, this is what we are selecting. Inside web, we have REST repository. Okay, so we have selected H2, JPA and REST repository. We don't have to go for web here because we are not making a web application. Now click on next and then click on finish. That's it. This is what you need to add. So we got our project here, and if I see the dependencies, we got a lot of dependencies here. Now, what is the first thing we need? Now, of course, we need to configure H2, right? And where do we do that? So in the resources, we need in the application properties, we need to specify some properties for H2. I will not be typing those again because we have done that in the last project. So let me just copy those properties here and paste. Okay, now what are these properties? Very simple. First, you have to enable your H2, your database, and then you need to specify which platform you are working on and the URL. Now, once you have specified your properties, the next thing we need is initial data, right? Of course, I can create this file by myself, but then just to save the time, I will copy this file. It's very easy, actually. You just need to create a SQL file or a normal file with an extension .sql, and then just add your insert statement there and put that in a resource folder. That's very important. Now, once you have done with the application properties and the data.sql, okay, it looks good. Let's create a repository, right? So we need to, in fact, before that, we need to create a model class. So in this demo, I will create a new class. I will name this class as alien, and let's put this class in a model package. Now this class alien will have certain properties. The first property we need is, we'll say private int AID, and we'll say private string a name and private string tech. And for this we need getters and setters. So let me just do that. Getter and setters, select all, click on OK. So we got our getter setters, and I also need a toString method. So I would say source toString, select all the variables which you want, and we got it. Okay, now since we are working with JPA, so of course we need to add this annotations, right? The first thing we need here is add entity. This is how you mention that this is eligible for database. Let's import the package, and for AID I will mention this is a primary key, and then I also want to generate the value by itself. So I would say generated value. I want it to be auto increment basically. Now this is done. We have done with ID and generated value, so it should work. Next thing I need here is a controller. Oh, that's good, right? We don't need a controller here because we are working with Spring Data REST. Directly we go for a repository. So we'll go for interface, and this interface I will name this as alien repo, the same thing which we have done before, and click on finish. Now in this alien repository will extend one interface, which is JPA repository, because we want all the features, right? Now, example, when I say all the features, I'm talking about, code operations, addition, which is adding new data and then deleting the old record, all those stuff. Let's import the package. Now, once I got this interface, it should work, right? Everything we have done. This is so simple. We have not done much. I have simply created the alien, which is a model class, and a repository. There's no controller. So if you want to build a REST services, you don't basically need all the extra features, right? Or you don't basically need MVC for that. But will this work? Now there are certain questions we need to answer, because if I see the controller, let's go back to the controller. Let's see how a normal controller looks like. So if you look at a controller, we have a name here, which is aliens. Okay, we have an alien name. We are mapping it with something, right? So when a user send a request, we have a lot of things here which is used for mapping. In fact, this one, how will you pass this value if I want to pass some specific values? Now, is it your Spring Boot data JPA data REST is so smart that it will give it to you? Okay, so it should, but then it requires only one thing, and that one thing is you need to use an annotation here. So it is called repository REST resource. And in the bracket, you have to specify two properties. So we'll say control space, or two attributes. One is collection resource URL, the base URL you are going to use. I would say aliens. And then the path. So path is also aliens. So you have to specify these two attributes. That's it. And it should work now, because whenever you send a request, you have to make sure that you are using aliens here. Now with this, let's see if it is working. So I will just close this. I will just stop the old execution and start the new one. So I will say Spring Data REST run as Spring Boot app. Okay, now how do I verify this if it is working? I don't know. Let's go back to the Postman, and we have some earlier execution. Let me just close those things. And here I will send a request. I would say localhost colon 8080 slash. Now what type of request I should send? I will be sending aliens because this is what you have configured in your repository, right? Aliens here. Click on enter. Oh, we got our data. And if you can see, it also has certain links. Now, if you have seen Hetios, we have to provide links as well, right? And it is doing it for you. Normally we do that manually, but your Spring Data REST is giving you the links as well. And it's saying that if you want to access any resource, this is a URL we'll be using. Let's try. So if I click on this URL, click on send, you can see that we got data for 1. If I fetch about 5, oh, it's working. You are able to fetch all the records. What if I say 06? Let's try. Click on send. Oh, you can see we got the status as 404. Awesome. So get is working. What about I'll go for post. I want to create a new resource. Now before that, I will just fetch the resource so that I can copy paste. I want to create a new resource. I will copy this code and then I will go back to post, body, and I will send raw, paste. Make sure that this is JSON, and I will create a new record. So I will say Priya, machine learning, and the ID is, okay, I will say this is 106 because anyway, we will be using auto-generated. So I will say 106 and click on send. Is it working? No, it's not working. There's something wrong here. It's still oh, okay. The thing is, I should not be putting the /105 again. I'm making the same mistake again and again. Click on send. It's working. Can you see that? Oh, we got it one. Oh, there's an issue here. The issue is that's my bad because in the data file, if you remember, in the project in data file, I started the numbering from 101. That was my bad. You know, I should start numbering from 1. So when you say auto-generated, it started with 1. Okay, and to access that now, we have to use 1. Okay, my bad. It was my mistake, but that's fine. We will delete it. So I'll say delete, and I want to delete 1. Done. It says no content, is it? Because it is not returning a content. I will try to fetch all the aliens now. 106 gone, is it? Yeah, 106 gone. Okay, that's good. So you can add, you can delete. In fact, we can also use put. For putting, we have to update data, right? And I will be updating 103 this time. I don't know who's 103. It's Praveen. So let's copy this, and I will try to put. So which is updating basically, and I will go to the body and here. So what I will update, let's say Praveen is not working on Python. Let's say Praveen is working on AI. And then that's one update I want to go for, and I will click on OK. And is it updated? Yes, we got the updated one, which is AI. So you can see that we got all the options. You can delete, you can put, you can post. So that's the magic of Spring Data REST, right? Now how it is working behind the scene. Now since you are mentioning aliens here, so it's something you can assume, right? So when you run the project, it is localhost colon 8080, and the URL which you are mentioning is alien. And anyway, all the methods are pre-built in this JPA repository. That's the power of Spring Data. And REST says, I will map it with the help of this URL. So it is the power of REST because you are getting that all the features of linking, and you got REST, or you got data using which you can perform the operation. So that's how you work with Spring Data REST. In fact, you can do some advanced stuff. Let me know in the comment section if you have done that. So I will motivate you to explore more on Spring Data REST. So that's it from this video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comment section, and that's it. Thanks so much for watching, everyone.